We're live. That's fantastic, Carl. Thank you. JP, how are you?
I'm good. Thank you very much for having me. I'm very honored to be, one of the scapegoats, one of the official scapegoats of this little initiative that you've started.
You're definitely one of the first people that I've had on the show, and it's awesome to have you. It really is a privilege to have people like you that I know. Oh, Carl, we've had the monitor go out. Hold on, I think we're back. Okay, we're back. You brought up the monitor and the picture on the monitor, and we'll talk about that later. But
Okay.
It's awesome to have you here. I think
sure.
we started this podcast with me downing like a little ice cream thing filled with kefir, and we started talking about probiotics, and we started getting into the weeds.
All great conversations start with an initial dose of probiotics.
So you take probiotics?
Yeah,
Do you
absolutely.
take
Take a bunch
as well?
of different vitamins, supplements, probiotics. Yeah, try to do all that stuff every day.
Fair.
Love it. Yeah, and I feel great.
So what exactly do you take? What's your regimen?
Yeah, that's something I've thought about a lot because my friends know me as the person that never gets sick.
Okay.
And I don't know which individual part of my routine I have to thank for that. But I just try to like tick all the boxes. So I get a lot of sleep, go to the sauna. I don't know if you guys are fans of the sauna or anything.
You know we're big fans of the sauna.
That's where we met.
Yeah, exactly. And we've done 100 episodes in the sauna. So no, we know each other well, and we know we have a good chat, and that's why you're here today. It's
for sure.
It really is a pleasure. But okay, so you get a lot of sleep. I know your training regimen's pretty strict, and I know you love the sauna as well.
Yeah.
What does your training exactly look like? Is it a push-pull leg split? Are you doing more cardio-based things? I know, but let the people know what you're doing and how intense it is, because I know you'll be humble and you'll say like, oh, it's nothing crazy, but I know you work pretty hard. You're there most days.
For sure. I think between the three of us, we'd be some of the hardest trainers in that gym. I'm not too humble to admit that. I just try to do a really well-rounded fitness regimen, trying to make sure my flexibility, cardio, strength, and overall health are as good as they can possibly be. And in order to achieve that, in the gym, you'll see me doing a lot of stretching, probably not as much stretching as you, but I try to get a fair bit of it in. And then a lot of cardio. And when I hit the weights, keep it really functional, prioritize form and execution. And then if I can, I'll do a bit of boxing, which I know that you're a fan of that as well. And that's more or less what it looks like. It's a lot of time invested in the gym, but I wouldn't trade it for anything. I think it gives you so much more than you put in, and it translates into all the other areas of your life. So I've always been someone who put a lot of effort into their health and their fitness, and I try and generally succeed in encouraging all the people around me to do the same. Yeah, and I've obviously hyped you up enough already. Yeah,
it gets so hot in here. I got to take my jumper off. I was getting all red too, I feel like.
Yeah.
Nah, I can't have the jumper in here. It gets warm. For people who don't
Under
know,
the bright lights.
This is in my house, just like in the little dungeon, the little basement set up with these curtains here.
Yeah.
And it gets warm.
Yeah.
So
what a fantastic spot.
Oh, it is great. I'm so lucky.
Well.
I'm so blessed to be able to put this in my house and have the space.
And the location. What a great place to launch your business, to launch your dream, to make it happen. I think
the right age too.
Spot.
And we've talked
definitely
about
at the right age. Definitely at the right age.
You've only got a small window to make your dreams come true to some extent.
Yep.
Before responsibilities weigh you down and become so much harder.
Yep.
And
so you treat the dream like it's a responsibility, and I love that, and I'll do everything I can to support it. I think that you're doing it for the right reasons as well. Like there's a lot of positivity and a lot of gratitude that seems to pervade what you're doing. Some people will chase their dreams for different reasons. Some people are running away from something versus running towards something. And in terms of motivation sources, maybe they're all equal as long as it gets you to do the thing. But yeah, I like what seems to be motivating you. And I think everyone does. It's kind of infectious.
No, I appreciate that. That means a lot coming from you. And I think we have such a great connection because when you talk, you're able to disconnect your ego from the conversation. It just feels like you're very present, and you don't have anything at stake. You're not concerned with what I might think about you. You're not concerned about my judgment.
Nah,
just
no
freely
way.
you. But that's so rare these days. You know what I mean?
That's a skill of you as someone to talk to, right? And that probably is a really good skill for a podcaster to have. Some people, a lot of people will talk about, this person's easy to talk to or this person is hard to talk to. I think it comes down to you. I think I learned that when I moved to Germany, and before I went, a lot of people were like, oh, the Germans, kind of standoffish and cold. And that was not my experience at all. And so I think, my takeaway from that is like people can be really nice and really open, but you have to go first.
I hear you.
And when you do that, no one bats 1,000, but the vast majority of the time, you're going to have a really good conversation or a really good connection with someone.
Tell me about Germany. When did you go?
Yeah.
How long did you go for? Was it through work?
I was there for a few months. I was a visiting scholar at the University of Hamburg.
Wow.
Yeah, I was doing my PhD at the time, and through Macquarie, and I got the opportunity to go and study in Hamburg under a couple of people there. It was in international relations, and they've got a lot of really prominent experts in that field. And I just, on a whim, I think I was cruising the web one night, and I saw this program was starting, and I thought, what the hell, I'll apply. I didn't know anything about Hamburg as a city in Germany. I definitely didn't speak any German. And I got the call up to go last minute. I had to be there within like a week or 2 weeks of them telling me. And
Quick
so,
turnaround.
yeah, I basically got the call saying, do you want to move to Germany? And I just made the call on the spot, like, yeah, I do. And I got off the plane there, and I didn't speak a word of German. I didn't know anyone in the city or anything. It was like a totally clean slate.
And you were in Berlin?
I was in Hamburg.
Oh, you were
in
sorry,
Hamburg.
Hamburg,
Yeah,
sorry.
city in northern Germany.
Yes.
And just loved it. Loved that experience. Met so many amazing people. Love Germany. Germany's always got a special place in my heart now. Hamburg was amazing, and so is Berlin as well. I'm a big history buff, so yeah, obviously love Berlin. And I just love the experience. It was awesome.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Were you able to travel while you're in Europe living there and go see so many countries that are so far away for us?
Definitely.
They're a lot closer if you're based in Germany.
That is the main advantage. Oh, there's a lot of advantages, but that's one of the main advantages of living in Europe. I'd actually lived in Europe before that. I lived in Spain, in Madrid, and it was a lot of fun too. A lot of the places I went in Europe were really special. I imagine you've done a lot of travel.
I have.
Around. Yeah. You went to Nepal.
I did.
Is that right? Earlier this year?
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
late last
Late
year,
year, over
really
Christmas?
late last year, pretty much.
Yeah.
From
Okay.
December 1st to
Yeah.
December 22nd with my brother, and then a mate named Riley Felton, who I've known since primary school, and we went up and did the Everest Base
Isn't your
Camp
brother's
Trail.
name Riley?
Yeah, my brother's name's
Yeah,
also Riley,
yeah.
so it was me and two Rileys,
Uh-huh,
and we
uh-huh.
went up and did the Everest Base Camp track, and it was awesome. Like,
Wow.
genuinely the trip of a lifetime.
Uh-huh.
My brother actually left for Vietnam with his boys to go backpack in Vietnam.
Yeah.
It's going to be amazing, and he just left today, so he's really stoked for that.
Wow. What an
Backpack.
adventurous family.
I
That's
know,
so cool.
I know. We're
How
so
does-
lucky to be doing all these things. Travel's such a privilege, and I talked about it on the last episode
agreed.
with Leon for hours, and we could get into it too.
Yeah.
About
Let's
just, like,
recycle it.
the amazing, benefits of travel.
Yep.
It's
For sure.
it's
How did
amazing.
Nepal come up?
Well, my brothers always wanted to go to Nepal,
Mm-hmm.
but I never really had that desire to really go.
Mm-hmm.
And then my mate Riley Felton came up for another mate's 21st birthday party,
Mm-hmm.
and the three of us, we've known each other since we were 5 years old, and so we rock up to this 21st, and we're having an absolute great time. And Riley Felton spits this yarn about, I've done the Kokoda Trail with my dad.
Wow.
And that
First
was
of all, that's
awesome.
insane.
That's insane,
Yeah.
right? And now I want to do Everest Base Camp with the boys.
Yeah.
And so I was like,
Yeah.
that sounds pretty sick. And in December,
Sounds like
I
a
was,
conversation after a few beers.
it really does. But in December, that's a really good time for me to go away because there wasn't too much
Yeah.
happening in investor relations, which is where I was working at the
At the
time.
time,
So
yeah.
I was able to, I knew I could take pretty much the whole month of December and really
Mm-hmm.
do this thing properly. And that's what we did. I knew my brother would be keen, so I invited him straight away. We knew, we planned this 9 months in advance. So we did a
Mm.
bunch of training. My mate Riley Felton, he lives down on a large farm sort of land. They've got goats and
Where's
sheep
that?
and things in Bowral. And so
Beautiful.
it's 2 hours drive. It's absolutely fantastic down there, and a bunch of hikes, great mountains to go see. And oh man, it was absolutely amazing. Experience of a lifetime.
Yeah. Physically, how much did you prepare, and how did you perform, in the high altitude and with that high incline?
The first thing you get back, the first thing people ask you when you get back
Yeah.
is, was it hard? And honestly, the actual physical trek wasn't difficult. It was just the compounding, mental fatigue of just having to do this over and over again. And it's just, the altitude sucks, and you're
What's the
tired.
temperature?
Oh, we went in December, which is their winter, and because it's their winter, there's not much rain because their rainy season
Dry.
is more that summer monsoon area.
Yeah.
And so that warmer weather, but when we went, it was freezing. It was
Yeah.
winter, and at nighttime it was -40, which was
Sorry.
the coldest it would get.
Minus 40 degrees Celsius.
-40 if you went outside at 8 p.m. From 8 p.m. to maybe 5 a.m. -40 degrees. But during the day
Yeah.
it was about 5 to 10 degrees. So it wasn't too bad if the sun was on you and you were walking, but as soon as you stopped or as soon as you weren't in the sun, it was below zero.
So how do you sleep, or how do you stay warm enough in
Well,
that
we
kind of
were in
condition?
these tea houses, which are just like these little tiny huts, and they, after a certain amount of altitude, trees don't grow, so they don't have wood to heat the houses,
Yep.
right? So they have to take yak poo and put it in this giant furnace, and that's how they heat
Yep.
these big like like whole rooms of just little shacks, and these are tea houses, and they're awesome, but they're also like pretty rugged. You got to be pretty excited to go to Nepal to take on the trek, like I was
Not glamping.
no, it's not. And I was talking about it with my parents, and like they've always contemplated like, oh, would we do it? Would we not do it? After hearing our experience, which was sketchy sometimes, but amazing in a lot of ways too.
Yeah.
They don't. They're
Your parents are like, no, we're out.
I know they're not gonna.
They saw the photos. That's good enough.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And they're not cut out for the late nights and the freezing temperatures.
And so you have to make it to
sickness.
tea houses each day.
Yeah. So you essentially
you've got a goal each day of how far you have to go. Yeah. You can't just set up camp wherever.
Exactly.
What if bad weather strikes or something like that?
They're like the sketchiest part of the whole trip actually is the flight, because you're going from Kathmandu. So we were in Kathmandu for 3 days, sort of acclimatized to both the culture and the the
altitude,
elevation, right? And then head up to a place called Lukla by plane, which is about 3,500 meters above sea level. Small plane. Like this thing was a little flying nugget. It was rocking around this way and that way in the air, and that like. Those time that was the real scary time of this whole trip. There was another scary time just after Lukla. Like a huge rock came like billowing down this huge cliff, and we were walking kind of in the middle of it, and it almost cleaned up a member of our group that we were walking with. Honestly, a meter from her head, and it would have killed her easily. Like. No doubt, and
that's just a normal thing that happens.
That was on the second day, and we were in the easy part of the trek, low elevation, and we were like, "Oh wow, this is not a joke."
Can't even imagine.
Yeah, this is not a joke. It was crazy, and we were all like, it all happened in this like span of 5 seconds.
Yeah.
We're all 5 meters apart. It was insane, and it really, it set you straight.
Yeah.
Because it's a bit. Because we were younger, it was a bit of a joke to us, like, "Oh, we're fit, we're gonna be fine." Like, it's gonna be hard.
Easy.
That snaps out of you really quickly when you see something like that happen, right? And you're only 2 feet away, and it could happen to your brother or your friend or you, and it's just lucky that no one got hurt.
Yeah.
So it sets you straight pretty quick, and it is tough. It wasn't physically difficult for me and my brother and my friend. We're all just gym fanatics. We're all like play sports. We all do. And we all do a lot of hiking and a lot of exploring in nature anyway. So it's nothing that we're...
How many kilometers a day?
Like, 16, 20 kilometers a day. But it was more the elevation that kills you.
Yeah.
So it's like, you're essentially walking for 8 hours every single day. And that's just how it is. But the elevated parts are the only parts that are really difficult about it. Yeah. And when I say difficult, you can do it. It's not like you never really feel like you're gonna you're gonna quit, and you can always kind of make it. But that's how me, my brother, and my friend feel at 21, right? Because we did this last year. But we had members of our group. We initially went with 14 members. Only 9 people ended up making it all the way, the whole circuit, which is, 2 people had to get helicoptered out at a place called Dingboshe, which is about 4,000 meters above sea level. And so they were both gone. And then we had another 3 people pull out after we'd already gone to Everest Base Camp. But on the way down, they couldn't hack it. They just, after 9-10 days, their bodies just gave out.
Yeah.
So, that was 5 people gone out of 14. So that was only 9 of us actually did the whole thing.
And which took how long?
Which took 14 days.
14 days.
And as you asked before, is there kind of set structure? It is a 14-day program. You start in a place called Lukla, then you go to a place called Namche, then you go to a place called Dingboshe. But you're kind of going slowly in just those locations I said. That might be 5 nights because you're doing like acclimatization days, I guess you could say, where you're going up higher and then sleeping lower, which is how you naturally get there, and that's the technique. So during the day,
you shouldn't sleep up higher.
No. The idea
that's too long to spend.
It's too long because your body will just be in shock. Yeah. The idea is we go from Lukla to Namche, and then we're in Namche for an extra day. That extra day, that first day that we're there, we go up and do a hike, maybe 800
Mm-hmm.
meters extra elevation, stop there for maybe 2-3 hours, chill out, have a sandwich, a cup of coffee, come back down, and then we sleep at lower altitude. And then the day after, we go to the Dingboche, we go to the next
Right,
village, and then we
right.
might do the same thing at the next town, or we might go straight on, depending on the program. And there's like 7-8 villages along the way, and then we did a different route going back, which was absolutely fantastic. We visited this place called Tangboche, which has this amazing monastery there, and it was just beautiful. Absolutely
Still in
beautiful.
use, this monastery?
Still in use.
Yeah.
The people that go and summit Everest, because in winter nobody summits.
Taoist monks, or what were they?
They were Hindu monks.
Hindus?
Yeah.
Oh, really?
And
Okay.
so it's a Hindu country pretty much, and they have amazing Hindu artwork over there and temples. It really is a sight to behold.
Yeah, it'd be like
amazing.
something from a different planet. And I imagine the experience of the villages that you're passing, you must look at them in their lives and just, yeah, it's almost like passing an alien.
It really is.
And they would look at you the same way.
No.
And your life the same way.
It was absolutely fantastic. I really want to get some of the artwork that they had there, because it is absolutely beautiful. Just the patterns and the symmetry and the symbolism. It's amazing. And it is a very dramatic religion, I feel. Like Hinduism, they've got a lot of like symbolic patterns and meanings and a lot of deities and things like that. There's a lot of story and culture. Just
A lot of amazing
behind it.
stories. I love that stuff. Yeah.
Exactly. And it's just to be in the place.
It's extremely
where
old
they
religion as well.
yeah, exactly. Where, in that Tibetan mountain sort of thing where it's founded. It's just amazing. It really is. So have you ever done anything crazy like that? Like an Everest?
Like an adventure?
Yeah, adventure holiday?
I was thinking, as you were talking about altitude and elevation, I was going to ask you, there was a time when altitude and elevation were seen as the next big things in sports and exercise and fitness. And, everyone would, not everyone, but a lot of people at the gym would be wearing the mask and so on. And the impact of that. I worked at a gym that had an altitude room. It would mimic the effect of high altitude. And I really thought that was going to take off. And it actually never did in the end, right? Even though I think it's a great idea. And
is there science backing it? Like, because
the impact of doing exercise, with thinner air.
Yeah, it would naturally.
I believe so. I think it does boost your red blood cell count, etc.
VO2 max, things like that.
So yeah, I just thought that was really, you reminded me of that. And I'm like, what happened to that craze? What have I done? I haven't done too much of the adventure travel. I really want to. I want to do a big South America trip.
Ooh,
That's always been a dream of mine.
you're telling me.
Yeah.
I'm so excited.
There's a fantastic book, and it has been made into a movie called Diarios de Motocicleta, which is like motorcycle diaries. And it's a book about a journey taken by Che Guevara. Do you know who that is?
No,
It's like
I
a
don't.
famous Latin American revolutionary.
Okay.
Who's like instrumental in the Cuban Revolution, and he was participating in the Bolivian Revolution when he was killed. But there's a very famous picture of him with a beret on, and he's got a beard. And it's like a black and white photo that's become like
See if you can find that
essential
photo.
in Marxist iconography.
Yes.
You definitely would know this guy's silhouette.
Yes.
But he was a young medical student in Argentina in maybe the 1950s. And he and one of his best friends decided to go on a motorcycle trip around South America at the time. So I think they went west to Chile, and then they went up that western coast of the continent, all the way up to Peru and past there. And he wrote a book about his experiences, and those experiences ultimately led him to radicalize, because he saw the amount of poverty, the amount of inequality in income distribution, the amount of corruption in all these different governments. And that's what motivated him to participate in the Cuban Revolution, which he was ultimately successful in. And then he was helping govern Cuba with his friend Fidel Castro. Anyway, if you cut out the quite unsavory revolutionary stuff, it is a really, really good book, and it'll motivate anyone really to travel there and want to experience that, because obviously South America is a very special place. But I haven't done it yet, and I imagine that would involve some of the adventuring and mountaineering that you're talking about. But as of yet, no, I haven't. I think all of my suffering has been voluntary.
I hear you. So, like, voluntary suffering is important too.
Yeah.
Just go on gym, sauna, long sessions, long boxing sessions that I see you do. Just
Oh
wearing
yeah,
yourself out.
for sure.
It's necessary. When it comes to South America, what are some bucket list destinations? And because we could talk all day about just the treasures that South America has, from Easter Island to the beaches of Brazil.
Yeah.
Where are you thinking?
I would also incorporate Central America into this conversation. I think Central America although it's not without its social and political problems, especially lately. I think there's a lot of reasons to visit places like Mexico. Love the history of the region, the Aztecs, the Zapotecs, the Incans, the Mayans, all of those societies. Would love to see any of the ancient artifacts from those. And in terms of cities, I have a lot of Colombian friends that have told me a lot about Colombia. So like Cartagena, Cali, Medellin, Bogota, those sorts of cities. I would love to visit those. And then Peru seems beautiful as well as Chile probably.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, all the hits, and I will do the trip, and I'll have to report back on how it goes.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
No, that's fantastic. We talked about voluntary suffering a little bit. We talked about, just getting after it, going to the gym, exhausting yourself.
Yep.
What do you think about rest days? I know you're at the gym most of the time, and I think we might have talked about this before, but what is your opinion?
For years, I trained every single day, and I was very lucky that ultimately never injured me, but I decided to stop pushing my luck because I felt like that probably wasn't good for you. And I was like training really, really hard every single day for like, maybe 2 or 3 years straight, right? And now I don't do that. I incorporate rest days. I try to only train maximum of 3 days in a row, and then I'll have a rest day. But on a rest day, I will still run or do a walk. So that's still a rest day to me. But I do think there's something really important about incorporating occasional rest days to prevent that, central nervous system overload, etc. So I don't train every day. But I can also see a way where you could structure your programming and bring your volume down so that there was no need for a rest day. But when I'm at the gym, I do go pretty hard. So I need the rest days with how it is set up right now.
I agree with that. I think pushing yourself to the max and then giving yourself the time to recover is better than just petering down everything and being able to do it all the time.
Yes,
you gotta know your limits, and the only way to know is to push them. So, and that's why I think that's why exercise is so fun, and that's sort of why I have a bit of an exercise addiction. I feel.
Oh, you totally do.
I can't
you've
live
got
without
it.
Yeah, I got
we'll
bit
both
by
be in
the bug.
recovery together. Exercise Addicts Anonymous.
Agreed.
I was lucky enough to train with a couple of really, really high level athletes when I was living in Germany. A couple of them are now, competing in World High Rocks Championships. One of them ended up going to the Olympics for weightlifting.
Wow.
And another one was an acrobat in Cirque du Soleil. And so I was training with them and working with them a lot, and I learned a lot of really important things from them. One of them being, controlling, maximizing intensity and then maximizing the amount of rest you have. Being emphasis on flexibility and muscle stability as well, which I got from them. They kind of shattered my illusions about the cleanness of sports as well. One of them was in the Bulgarian. I probably shouldn't be even giving the details of it, but he was in the Bulgarian Olympic weightlifting setup, and his attitude was that in the Olympics, it's fundamentally a corrupt system where you have to pay the IOC and WADA your bribes as a country, and that athletes get popped and test positive when there's an issue with their bribes or the amount of bribes that are being paid, but that the Olympics is fundamentally unclean from a drug testing perspective, which I still think about, and I'm not sure I believe him, but he probably would know better than me, and he was adamant that that's how it actually works.
Wow.
Yeah, isn't that interesting?
Well, there's been so many scandals, and there's
a lot of scandals. Icarus, right?
Yeah,
you know about that?
That was insane. There's been a lot of
the
scandals.
Chinese one,
Russians, all the Russian stuff.
Yeah.
We could be here for days and have Carl pull all this up, but there's the Olympics has a lot of problems, and I think in a sport
tremendous amount of problems.
In a sport like weightlifting, where steroids and enhancers make such a difference,
huge difference.
It's hard to ignore that. Especially with the advancements in like bioidenticals that can't be identified with the regular testing that they do, and the Olympic system is also very behind on their testing. They're
always going to be behind.
No, they really are
the cheaters. Yeah,
and they just don't. It feels like the Olympics never reinvest back into the Olympics. They kind of just take all the money for themselves, and it doesn't really get any better. Like the testing doesn't really get any better. There's always these rumors. There's always these scandals.
And then begrudgingly you do a small investment to upgrade things when it gets too bad.
Exactly. And
I agree.
this is
I
where
agree.
stuff like the
Yeah.
enhanced games, even though even
Yeah.
if you completely disagree with it, just having a competitor in the space
Yeah.
forces the
Shaking
Olympics
things up.
to
Yeah.
get their
Yeah.
shit together.
Yeah.
Get a third party testing agency to test
Uh-huh.
the athletes instead of some BS program that you set up 2 weeks before.
Yeah.
In the country,
Yeah.
whatever
You've
country
got to have
you're
out
doing
of
it in.
competition
No,
testing as
it's
well,
yeah,
obviously.
it's ridiculous.
I think the Russians, in their program of systematized doping, I think they found there were only like 2 events where athletes didn't respond positively to using steroids and other forms of enhancement. And I think it was shooting and figure skating.
Yeah,
Shooting and figure skating, because the amount of fine motor control that was needed, it's actually worse to dope
it
in
would
those
be.
sports. But everything else it makes you better. And yeah, but I like that idea actually of having, you have an incumbent or someone who is monopolizing a space, and then someone comes in to disrupt it. I think the example that springs to mind is, how much do you know about One Championship
Yeah, a
in
lot.
MMA?
I love
Yeah?
One Championship.
You do?
And I think
Yeah.
they're important. I think, I love the UFC. The UFC is a premier
sure. Yeah.
MMA organization.
Yeah.
And most of the MMA I watch is the UFC.
Yeah.
But these other organizations are really important. Otherwise, the UFC will get sloppy in their promoting.
Yep.
They might not put on the fights that we want to see.
Monopoly's
They might
not
innovate.
good. No.
A monopoly is not good. You need competition to drive innovation. And, in martial arts, like innovation sounds weird when you're talking about mixed martial arts, but it's real. Because in One Championship, you see these fights where they do 1 round Muay Thai, 1 round
those are so
Jiu-Jitsu,
cool.
1 round Muay. It's awesome.
Yeah.
Right. And for fans who are, and a lot of fighters, when they're not fighting for titles anymore, they're not in like real title contention. These fun fights make a lot of sense, and we want to see them. I love how the UFC has now started putting on like legitimate jiu-jitsu
Grappling
competitions.
tournaments, yep.
Yeah, they've got like Mikey
Yep,
Musameshi,
saw that.
against I can't remember the other guy's name, but famous grapplers that they've brought over from these other organizations, and now more people are gonna be tuned into jiu-jitsu, into competitive grappling, into the ADCC, into Craig Jones Invitational, all these things.
Oh yeah,
right?
That's a great example as well. Yep.
Exactly, where a competitor comes in, and it's necessary. It really is necessary to drive the sport forward and to make it as popular as it can be. And I think,
and they can coexist. UFC and One
for sure,
are different enough. Even if you just compare them from an MMA perspective, I would say the UFC is bringing in talent, and it wants the best martial artists. And One Championship, they admit they put a really big emphasis on finishing ability, and so because they believe that martial arts is all about self-defense, and self-defense requires finishing. There's no judges there's no 3 judges scoring the bout when you're getting mugged. So they have this emphasis on finishing ability, and that actually has translated to, I think, across the UFC they have something like a 50% finish rate, and in One Championship MMA they have like a 65%, which is a lot, especially when you think One Championship biases towards the lighter weight classes. One Championship, it's a lot of Asian fighters, right? And it tends to have a lot of fights that are in the lower weight classes. They have a heavyweight division, which I think is a long way off where the UFC heavyweight division's gone to. Are you familiar with the story of the guy that founded One Championship?
No,
Chatri?
I know him.
Yeah,
but I don't know that his story.
Very interesting guy, half Thai, half Japanese. His dad abandoned his family when he was really young, so he grew up in like abject poverty, but he studied really hard and made it into Harvard for his MBA. And his family was so broke that his mum, when he was living on campus at Harvard, his mum lived with him. And he made it out of Harvard, and then he got into hedge funds, became very, very successful in hedge funds, made a lot of money, and was doing really well. And he left all of it to start One Championship, put everything into One Championship, because he was passionate about martial arts his whole life. Unlike, Dana White, not a shot at Dana White, but unlike Dana White, he was a lifelong martial artist. He's a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and he fought some professional Muay Thai fights, I think, as well.
Wow.
So he bet the farm on One Championship. And then there's a really crazy story where, after 3 years, they were struggling for money, and they were trying to attract institutional investment. And they had a meeting at an investment bank where they presented to the investment bank all these metrics on how One Championship was trending on Facebook. They made a big bet on Facebook, on the ability of Facebook to take them viral, and it was working, and they showed these metrics. And I think the investment bank wasn't interested, but one of the members of the investment bank was holding the metrics in the elevator on the way down from the meeting, bumps into another investor who's like, "Oh, what's that you're holding?" And he's like, "Oh, it's just like this this MMA fighting league in Asia, and this investor was so interested in what he saw that he ended up becoming or they ended up becoming the major investor in one championship, and that's how it then had its second kind of leap of growth, which is where it got to today. But yeah, it's an amazing story about serendipity and sometimes it's sliding doors.
Speaking of fights, did you watch the Kamaru Usman Joaquin Buckley fight
Yeah,
today?
I did. I'm so glad we're going to discuss it.
Well,
It was a great example of why I or anyone should never bet on MMA. I don't bet on MMA, but you should never bet on MMA.
you bet against Kamaru Usman. That's your fault.
That fight went nothing like how I thought it was going to go.
Oh.
I had no idea it was going to go that way. I thought, I love Kamaru, love what he's done. I watch all his old fights like a lot, like every week. Huge fan of his, but I just thought he was physically done. I thought Buckley would be too fast, too powerful on the feet and would knock him out like he did to Wonderboy. And I was completely wrong. Happily so.
It was awesome to see Kamaru Usman back at his best.
The Nigerian nightmare.
He really
What
was
a nightmare. Hey.
He was a nightmare for Buckley. The first 4 rounds, all he had to do was take him down one time, and
100% takedown accuracy.
He couldn't get back up. Just
how about
controlled
that diving takedown he did in the second round, where Buckley was trying to wheel away, and Kamaru takes a shot from way out, and it's just this amazing combination of like athleticism and a lifetime of technique, right? And he just leaps across the octagon and drags him down in one motion. It was like a lion taking out a gazelle.
Joaquin Buckley's wrestling isn't good enough.
It's not top level. And that's a very stacked division now as well.
And they have good wrestlers.
He's ranked 7th. And there's a lot of killers in that division.
Yeah. And if you're not going to be able to wrestle with Kamaru Usman, then you have no chance with Sean Brady. You don't have any chance with Rakhmonov, with Bilal. Like, Kamaru Usman, he's one of the best wrestlers in the UFC of all time.
For sure.
And he put that on display today. He really made
it.
Looked
amazing. So happy for him.
I can't believe.
Lovely guy.
I can't believe that he performed so well.
Yep.
Because they talk about his knees being cooked.
Yeah, he just moves like that. I think he's always moved like that. He does have bad knees, but the way he moves makes people go, look, his knees. And I think it's just his way of moving.
He's talked about it before, though, and I've heard him say that he doesn't do any running now. He can't run 400 meters.
He goes downstairs backwards or something.
Yeah,
right?
his knees just blow up.
Yeah.
So, and after such a long wrestling career, it just makes so much sense.
So he had a very long layoff of almost 2 years. I believe.
He fought Hamzat at the end of 2023.
So what does that say about the effect of having a long layoff? Because I've always been of the view that, particularly in fighting, you should really avoid long layoffs, that they're never good because ring rust is a real thing.
Agreed.
But it worked out great for him.
Who knows what he's doing with his body in the off-season, though? Like, I wouldn't be surprised.
I doubt he left the testing pool.
I don't know if he did. I don't know.
No, he wouldn't have.
I don't think he would have, because
that would be you would know.
It would have been a big
who's in and out of the testing pool.
But
Trevor Whitman obviously runs a tight operation.
Oh, he does. Yeah, he really does. But it doesn't, like someone like Usman, who's been so active for so long, to take such a long break. Like maybe that was what he needed after because he hasn't really lost a fight since the Leon head kick. Right?
Which he was winning off 4 rounds.
He was like just before he got head
and
kicked.
then the rematch with Leon, very tight fight. I've watched that a few times.
Exactly.
It's a very close fight that he could have stolen. A takedown in the 5th round, he probably wins a decision.
And then the Hamzat fight.
And then the Hamzat fight, he was clearly overhauling him towards the end of that. Should have been 5 rounds, right?
Yeah, if it was 5 rounds.
And this is a guy that won 15 UFC fights in a row, which is just insane when you think about the level of competition.
One fight off tying Anderson Silva's record.
Right.
Almost got there. Leon pulled out.
Anderson Silva's got the record, but not John Jones?
I think it must be.
It would be at like 19 fights in a row now.
I think because Jones got stripped.
Gotcha.
Yeah, and the streak got broken because of all the...
There was a no contest.
Yeah, and then remember DC was champ and all that stuff that happened 2016,
But really,
2017.
I mean, his win streak would be even longer, because even the one that ended the first win streak was the 12-6 elbow. Right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Disqualification. So he technically should be undefeated, and if he didn't do steroids, then he technically never should have lost the belt, and therefore he's just the greatest. If those two things are true, like he never touched any of those steroids, and he was legitimately clean, then he is the GOAT.
Did he ever claim that? I thought he claimed, look, he did do steroids, he got popped, but the second time he tested positive, that was a pulse, which means like he had stopped using, but it had just shown up in his blood again. I don't think he ever denied the first time.
I think he denied both.
And he
times.
tested positive for cocaine as well.
Yeah. I'm like,
I think he was dirty in that sense. I think there's a story about the testers coming for him and he hid under the training octagon.
Yeah, exactly.
Not something an innocent man does.
There's some strange stuff going on with John Jones, you know? It really is sus. And now that he's
really
not fighting Tom,
tarnished his legacy there. All he had to do was retire after the Stipe fight. No one would have begrudged him that. He just had to say, that was my plan. I want to retire.
I know.
But the in, the out has completely turned the MMA community against him.
It really sucks.
Which is, you hate to see that because it's a failure of PR. It's a failure of like personal branding and understanding how to communicate your plans. Because there is a way that he could have done this where we all would have been fine with it. He probably would have had to accept vacating the title, but he's just it's total mismanagement of this entire process, right?
I completely agree, and
now
it's completely unfair on Tom.
Yeah, it's super unfair on Tom. I always felt like Tom would win in a fight between the two of them. I think Tom's a lot younger, a lot faster, very well rounded. Yeah, so I would like to see that fight happen, but I don't know if we will see it happen now.
I want to take Tom because he's young.
Yeah.
And I know like no one's been able to test Tom because he just finished him in the first round. But we've never seen him dragged into deep waters.
Yeah.
And
it'd be a titanic struggle. Be a great fight.
John Jones is so good. And as you said, he is a bit older. He's on the older side. But in that Miocic fight, he looked like a world beater.
Looked
he
really
really
good.
did.
Looked really good all around.
Miocic didn't look very good, and it was just
so highly skilled, isn't he? In every phase,
just a technician.
Yeah.
He would trip him, take him down, let him get back up, then take him down with the wrestling, then stand with him and
the elbows. The striking was beautiful. It was really good.
It was a display.
And it's so it'll go so unappreciated because of what he's done in the aftermath.
I know. And as you said, he could have got out unscathed and just retired after that Miocic fight.
Everyone would have been like, no worries.
Listen, we wanted you to fight Tom, but if you don't want to fight Tom, we can't force you.
Yeah.
See ya. Right? Yeah. And Tom could have fought Cyril Gane now. He could be the undisputed champion of the world. Tom, the way Tom's been speaking recently, I've seen like little clips on social media and things like that. It sounds like the John Jones fight is now not happening.
Sounds off.
And now it sounds like it's going to be Cyril Gane.
I'm not super excited about that fight.
I think, Tom just goes and submits.
Similar athletes, a vast discrepancy in skills.
What do you think our prediction for that fight?
Aspinall's been training MMA his whole life. I believe Cyril Gane came to MMA extremely late in life. And I think that'll just play out, in the fight. Agreed. I think that they're both, fairly similar size, fairly similar athleticism, but just there's levels to the game. And Tom's been showing that his whole career, right?
No, great.
The fight that I would love to get your take on is going to be, it'll probably end up being the biggest fight of the year, is Ilya versus Charles. And like, how do you see that fight playing out? And what do you think will happen?
First of all, I hate that we even have to see that fight. I wanted to see Islam versus Topuria.
Yeah.
That's what I really wanted to see. That is the two best martial artists in the world right now. Like the definition of a martial artist. You could put that on Islam.
So well-rounded, exactly. In their primes.
Exactly. Yeah. This is the best definition we have. This is the most high-level
martial art fight you could make in the world, for sure.
Now we have Charles and Topuria, which is a good match. Good match. But it's a tough one. Like, what do I really think is going to happen with Charles and Topuria? Charles is a lot bigger than Topuria. That's the one thing that I will give him.
Similar size to Max.
Agreed.
Similar size. So when Topuria was in there with Max.
Topuria is smaller than Max.
No,
Max, like 5'10".
Charles and
sorry.
Max are similar height and reach, I would imagine. Charles probably has a longer reach, but similar heights.
Yes, I hear you.
So it's like the way he looked in the cage when he was with Max, that's what it'll look like with Topuria. The key difference will be that Max was on his bike that fight, and it actually was a decently close fight if you rewatch it. He was doing a lot of good work on Topuria's front leg. Every now and then in the striking exchanges, he was landing things of consequence. But Charles fights very differently to Max. Charles basically only fights moving forwards. Great. And Topuria also only really fights moving forwards. The one time where he wasn't fighting moving forward was against Jai Herbert and didn't look too good for him. So it's kind of like a rock versus the unmovable object versus the unstoppable force, because they're both going to be walking straight at each other. I think Charles is going to try and engage the clinch. He does a lot of good work in the clinch. His takedowns look really good against Chandler.
Great knees too in the clinch.
Yep, out of the clinch. Knees. Whereas Topuria is a very decorated Greco-Roman wrestler, so his clinch, he'd be very comfortable in the clinch. Obviously, a jiu-jitsu black belt too. So it is kind of a finely balanced fight and a very interesting matchup in a way.
Topuria finishes
It's
Charles.
it's hard.
I reckon.
I can very clearly see them engaging in a clinch, breaking, and Topuria landing a hook off the break that hurts Charles. And Charles goes down, and unlike a lot of fighters, I think Ilya will be afraid to grapple with him on the ground or to finish him with ground and pound.
No, he Topuria will just dive straight in there because he is a really high level
Very
jiu-jitsu
high
practitioner. I think
Phenomenal.
I think Topuria finishes Charles. I really do.
Yeah, that's a safe bet.
I think Topuria could finish Charles by the only reason I don't say Topuria could knock out Charles Oliveira and say finish is because I think Topuria might submit Charles Oliveira just
As a point?
to show that he can do it.
Do you think that fighters think on that level when you're locked in a cage with someone? Can you really think about what would be the coolest way to end the fight, or are you just so locked into the moment of fighting this man that like, for example, I think commentators or people watching fights will say that when a fighter is really up on the scorecards, they'll say that they are protecting or helping their opponent in the final rounds by not hurting them too much. And I'm like, there's no way someone is thinking along those lines.
No way.
They might be thinking about not risking getting knocked out, but they are not thinking while you're in a fight of not hurting the other guy too badly. And so I've seen that a couple of times, them say that. Like there was a Canelo fight, and that's just not what he was doing. So yeah, do you think that Topuria would be so clear-minded in that moment as to be like, yeah, let's submit him? That'll be really cool.
I think if he sees the chance to submit Charles Oliveira, he'll go for it.
Yeah,
that's what I'm saying. If an opportunity presents it, like in a situation where he might not dive on that arm triangle or that arm bar, he might just go for it. And especially if he has him hurt.
What a statement that would be.
If he has Charles hurt, I think
the way that Islam did it, right?
Exactly.
Islam hurt him and then immediately, that was such a beautiful sequence, actually, when
really
he did
was.
that.
The flying knee to the right.
Charles didn't do a lot wrong. Charles was devastated in that fight, but he didn't do a lot wrong in that fight. He was in it. It was, he looked a little bit more flustered than he normally does, but I mean, that's the way that Charles fights. All of his fights are
high pressure,
very high pressure.
Just foot to the floor, all gas.
He almost gets finished a lot, and then
like the Justin Gaethje fight, prime example of that. Gets dropped 2 times, and then hits Gaethje, drops him, and then submits him. Dustin Poirier, also,
Chandler,
exactly. Coming back when he won the title, coming back against Chandler, he almost got knocked out in the first round.
He was one hit away.
He really was. Just one solid flush hit to the noggin.
To the back of the head. I think Chandler decided in that moment, I'm going to hit the back of his head next time.
Next time.
He did.
Yeah, that was crazy. And he almost got him in that 5th round. He really did. It was crazy. But dude,
full of what ifs.
Chandler just got done by
Smoked by Paddy.
Exactly.
Paddy's a beast.
Is he?
Yeah, he's skilled. He's good. Yeah,
he is.
I think so.
I think like that Chandler test really was.
He's
the test.
He's passed almost every test with flying colors except for the Jared Gordon fight.
Oh, he looked so bad in that.
Yeah, he looked really bad in one fight.
They robbed Jared Gordon so bad.
He won that fight for sure.
It's so that is one of if you really look back on the last like post COVID,
some robberies. That's one of the worst robberies.
It really is. Like if you watch that fight, you're just like, and then you see like 30-27 on the judges' scorecards for Paddy, and you're like. It just makes you lose faith in the organization. You're like, the whole UFC is
just don't leave it up to the judges.
Exactly.
He has a history and beef with Ilya, and so that would be a fun fight from a build-up perspective.
No, agreed, and that's why I say, is he as good as we think? Does he deserve to fight for the
title?
Not
in lightweight, which I think is the premier division of the UFC. I think he's got to be one of the other top contenders.
But Ilya's calling for it. Ilya wants to fight.
Smart from Ilya. It would be a huge fight money-wise, and he probably outclasses him, right?
He would.
Big size differential, but he does.
We need to see Islam Topuria. This is what I'm talking about.
How could that fight even happen now?
If
is Ilya going to go up to welterweight?
I love Jack Della Maddalena, and I think what he's doing for Australian mixed martial arts is amazing.
Yeah, he's a legend.
He's a great guy. He's going to get cooked by Islam, I reckon. Yeah. Like think about
sizes.
Just think about Moicano. Think about Moicano, right? Comes in, and Moicano, I know it was a short notice fight for him, but he was fighting Beneil Dariush, so he would have been training for that week. True. So he would have been prepping for the grappling as well, right? He comes in against Islam. Moicano has 10 times better jiu-jitsu than Jack Della Maddalena, I reckon. Yeah. Like from a grappling perspective, he's the man. He's finished Turner, all these guys, right? He didn't stand a chance against Islam. Literally looked like
him in that first round.
He just ate him up. He really did.
Yeah, Islam is a different animal.
He stood with him for a minute. took him down the first time, jumped on his neck with that classic forearm grip Das choke that he does so well, and just cinched his lats up.
Yeah.
He had no choice but to tap.
I think the
best.
Dagestani's cop a lot of hate, but he took that fight on short notice, Islam. And Islam goes in there and he is not interested in leaving up to the judges' scorecards, right? He's trying to kill you in there.
Yeah. Well, there was a long time in the first kind of phase in his career where he was just winning decisions. He was just out grappling someone
after he got knocked out.
But then there was exactly. But then there was that kind of shift in his mindset, like kind of maybe 3-4 fights before he became champion, where he was finishing guys. And we're seeing that with Merab now, right? Merab was that classic cardio 5-round fighter,
position wrestler.
Exactly. He goes out there and finishes Sugar in the 3rd round by submission, and
looked fantastic in that fight, didn't he?
Amazing.
What is the answer to a guy like Merab? Because when I was watching that fight, I was reminded of a fight between Dan Hooker and Gamrot, Mateusz Gamrot.
Great fight.
Yeah, great fight.
Underrated great fight.
And Dan Hooker didn't defuse Gamrot. He almost got finished a couple times, but he did win the fight by walking Gamrot down. And Gamrot, even though he's a great wrestler, it's a lot harder to wrestle off the back foot 100%. And to shoot takedowns when you're getting forced against the fence. So is that the answer against a guy like Merab? You need someone who can walk him down and handle the pressure and apply their own?
I think what Dan Hooker did so well in that fight was the knees and the front kicks up the middle.
Yeah.
That really disincentivizes Gamrot from shooting. He's going to eat a knee or a front kick coming in.
And Sugar tried that.
Well, like he was. That's what Dan Hooker was doing essentially the whole fight, and he's so good with those weapons. Like Dan Hooker, he's like one of those 8-limb fighters where he's got the hands, he's got the feet, but he has knees and elbows too, and they'll cut you and they'll knock you out. And I think
he's very long for the division too. That helps.
As you said, Hooker almost got finished in the first round of that fight, right? And then came back, and I think those knees, like even Bilal against JDM, you know, the knees up the middle, the same way that JDM finished.
And JDM was also moving forwards in that fight against Bilal.
It makes it
so against those wrestlers, you do have to get on the front foot.
Yeah.
Because if you try and wheel around them and so on, and they're really comfortable and they're really good at that, and you inevitably tire out.
But I guess if I was building the perfect game plan to beat Merab, I think
is it Corey Sandhagen who can scramble with him?
No, I don't think so. I think the only person that can beat Merab is Umar Nurmagomedov.
Yeah,
I think
that's a great fight.
Because
it was such a fun fight.
Because I love Sandhagen. I think you know he will do well against Merab, but Sandhagen lost pretty badly to Umar. You know, and
very true. Very
so
true.
like, you know, and hasn't really done much to get this title shot back.
But
he's kind of just fallen into it, and I think he sort of deserves it. He's fought at the top of that division for a long time, and had so many great fights.
And he is a very well-rounded martial artist for sure. Right?
And he presents a lot of problems for Merab. Sort of the same problems that Sean does really well though too. You know,
I think he's got a lot better wrestling and grappling than Sean.
Agreed. But if Umar can out wrestle Corey and Merab can out wrestle Umar, Corey's still gonna have problems.
That's true.
You know what I mean?
The MMA math is
exactly. But if I'm Corey Sandhagen, just like Dan Hooker, Corey Sandhagen is a great 8-limb fighter. He uses his knees and elbows all the time, and he loves those weapons up the middle. So he's got to get those going. He's got to really. He's got to be able to stand the pace of Merab.
Yeah.
He's got to be able to weather the storm. You know, the whole fight. The whole fight, like your game plan can't have a hole in it for 5 seconds because Merab isn't going to take a break. He's going to be on the gas the whole fight, and
he's
not going to get tired.
Phenomenal athlete.
Exactly. And so your game plan can't be like, okay, first 2 rounds we're going to do this, then the 3, 4, 5 we're going to do this. You have to be able to withstand the pressure of Merab the whole fight and have a game plan that's going to work start to finish, right? And I think Corey, he might actually get it done. You know, he's like, it's kind of that underrated situation, like Sean Strickland, Adesanya,
very overlooked.
Peña, Nunes. Like, it's sort of one of those fights where it's like, oh, like, you know, you lost to Umar, you shouldn't even be challenging for the belt. We really want to see that Umar rematch. Well, I definitely do as well,
me too.
Personally, as a fan, because I really think that's the highest level fight. You know,
in that division,
for sure. And I think Umar's plan, like Umar has great wrestling and submissions, and I think if he could somehow out wrestle Merab, that would be the only way to beat Merab. But if that doesn't happen, I think Merab stays champ for ages.
It was a razor-thin fight. You know, if you rewatch that fight, Merab probably won 3 rounds to 2 and he won the 5th round. But, you know, if Umar lands one of his takedowns or lands a clean strike in the 5th round, that goes to Umar and the belt goes to Umar. You know, he wasn't comprehensively beaten in that fight, even though there were a couple little sound bites from that fight of him struggling to get up or Merab clowning him in certain situations. But really, the fight itself, razor thin.
Yeah, agreed.
And Umar, you know, Umar was tired, but like they both put in so much effort. Like Yeah, there was such a high level fight.
And apparently Umar Nurmagomedov broke his hand in the first round.
Looks
That's
that
what
way.
Ali Abdelaziz
Oh,
said.
there's a photo of his hand broken.
Yeah, it's like it's
for
all blown
sure
up and
broken.
things, but
That was a great example of, there's an argument to be made that, top level UFC fighters that they're the best athletes in the world, or that is the hardest thing to do in sports is to do that because, they're so technical and you've got to be so intellectual now at this level, in a variety of different disciplines. And then you've also got that fear aspect that they have to overcome of bodily harm, right? Compared to other sports.
Agreed.
So I was trying to make the argument to me the other day that tennis, that a top level, to win a Grand Slam in tennis is like the hardest thing to do in sports. That was the argument they were making. To steelman it, they were saying, you've got to beat the best players in the world. You got to win 7 matches over the course of 2 weeks, right? And the matches can go for 5 hours, right? And there's no timeouts. There's no opportunity to talk to your coach during it. So you're out there on your own. And these guys have been playing since they were 3 years old, so they're really, really good. And it can come down to just one moment. You have to be mentally locked in. That was the argument that they were making. And I'm like, yeah, there's some reasons there. I think if you were going to say what's the most difficult sport, it would have to be one of the individual sports, but I don't know if it would be tennis.
Yeah, I think individual for sure. Yeah. It's hard to put a metric on these things. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, what's the difference between winning Wimbledon and winning the UFC welterweight title? Let's say, like, both require
the welterweight title. You could die trying to get the welterweight title.
Agree,
right?
Agree.
Or be injured for the rest of your life.
The stakes are
so high.
The stakes are higher in MMA for sure. Yeah. But when it comes to like difficulty, the one thing about a UFC title or like any martial arts title really is it's not equal. If you think about what Bilal Muhammad had to do to win the belt, or what Merab had to do to win the belt, is a lot different.
Sugar.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Which is a lot different to a fighter that gets rushed into an opportunity. And a lot of the times, the people that get rushed into an opportunity usually don't succeed. But it's not the
Luke Rockhold.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And then Bisping to him when Bisping came in on short notice, right, to steal the belt away from him. Right. So that's the best thing about fighting, the storylines, right?
Yeah.
Do you have any favorite like storylines, like fights that you were really hyped up for because of the story, the backstory?
Because of what was behind it. And it didn't entirely deliver on it, but it would be Israel Adesanya versus DDP. Huge fan of both fighters, and both fighters as people as well. But the beef that they got into over the Kings of Africa fiasco.
Yes.
The fight itself, relatively close fight, which ended in a kind of an anticlimactic way. But yeah, the build up, I was really excited for that fight to happen. The other fights that happened, which I'm really grateful they happened, they were actually in boxing. They were between Dmitry Bivol and Artur Beterbiev. Are you familiar with these?
I am.
You follow boxing and
I follow not as much as MMA, but I do know this fight, and I do know it's a great.
Two incredibly high level at the time. They were both undefeated fighters. In just really cold Soviet machines of boxing precision, and they ended up fighting twice for Turkey Al-Sheikh, and they're two of the best boxing fights you'll ever see. And the amount of heart combined with each of them having incredible technical ability, incredible conditioning, like those are two of the highest level boxing fights that you'll ever see. So that's an example of when it did deliver on the hype.
What do you think about like Dana getting involved in boxing and like, Turkey Al-Sheikh having so much power to draw these athletes in just with pure wealth?
I think it's really fragile because, it's dependent on the Saudi Arabian regime. And you might have noticed that things in the Middle East aren't super stable right now.
No.
And as a result, the entire sport is predicated on Saudi Arabia continuing to want to invest billions of dollars in it at a loss. I think that's a really important thing to understand, that these events and promotions are being put on at a loss, right? Like they're paying, Tyson Fury $150 million for a fight, and for an event that there's just no way it makes that money back for them. And so that's a fragile position to be in, which is not good. But at least for now, the good fights are happening, and maybe that creates some kind of a trend. But it kind of sets a trend or sets a precedent in fighter pay in boxing, which is unsustainable. These top boxers are going to expect $75 to $100 million per fight, and you just can't. generate that amount of money from a boxing event these days in the age of piracy.
No, agree. It's absolutely
So,
crazy.
yeah.
And the fact that like the pay-per-view for boxing is $90, it just,
Yeah.
you know, it's
No one's buying
$110
that.
or
Yeah,
something
yeah, yeah.
crazy like that. As you said, no one's buying it. Like all these people that invest in boxing,
Yeah.
they lose money. Like
Yeah.
Chael Sonnen said this thing one time on like a UFC broadcast. The
Mm-hmm.
one thing you need to put a boxing event on is someone willing to lose millions of dollars, right? Because that's what's going to
that is
happen
great from Uncle
inevitably.
Chael.
Yeah, and
I love that guy.
he's so good.
That
He's
is,
so
I haven't
good.
heard that. I
One of the
really like
best
it.
UFC fighters to never win a belt, you know,
For sure,
really,
for sure.
really, and he almost did against Anderson.
Yeah,
but-
well, he thought when he tapped that just means he loses the round. He
Yeah,
didn't know.
he didn't
loses
know.
the whole fight.
His chat is actually
Yeah.
so good. It's the
sure.
it's probably the best
Incredible,
in UFC.
natural on the mic.
And I
Just
really
unbelievable.
And a lot of
ability.
people kind of hate him for it because he has that kind of like villain persona in the UFC. But I genuinely do think he's a good guy. Like I really do. And people kind of hate on him and shit on him for it. But I really think he's a lovely
Open
guy.
about abusing steroids during his career.
Yeah.
Just crazy, the honesty.
I love when he
Yeah.
talks about how do you know if John Jones is doing steroids or not? And Chael grabbed him and was like, "I'm on as much gear as I can possibly be on, and he's stronger than
must
me."
be, yeah.
You know, so how does this happen?
Yeah.
So, oh man, Uncle Chael, he really is the goat. At least on the mic,
Yeah.
he really is. Another guy, great person on the mic is Chandler. What do you think?
Michael Chandler?
Yeah.
Always liked Michael Chandler as a man.
He's a
you know,
great guy
love what he
outside the ring
stands
too.
for, all that kind of thing. I know he's had a couple controversies in the octagon though. Like I don't like the stuff that he did in the fight with Dustin against Charles. A lot of people accused him of hitting the back of Charles' head on purpose. There's probably a decent argument to be made there, but hard to avoid doing that in the heat of the moment. So I do love what he stands for. I think he's an example, or he highlights the evolutions that have occurred in the UFC over the last few years, where someone can be an outstanding athlete, but maybe not an outstanding martial artist. And there was a time where that was good enough. You could be one or the other. There were guys that weren't great athletes, but were great martial artists in one or two disciplines, and they found success. Whereas now the UFC is at a level where these are, in my opinion, some of the best athletes on earth from a technical and athleticism perspective.
No, you're completely correct. And I think, like, you know, they talk about the new age of MMA fighters and this new generation that apparently Ilia Topuria represents, which is a complete, well-rounded mixed martial artist. And I think, you know, Ilia Topuria says he's like the next generation of mixed martial artists. He represents,
Yeah,
you know,
he says that a lot.
the new skills that are coming through with, you know, a lot of the younger fighters. But I think before him, like Islam really put that on the table.
Great
and,
example.
And even
Yeah.
someone like Kamaru Usman really put that on the table. And Alexander Volkanovski, people who are really well rounded with the wrestling and with the
Volkanovski,
hands.
yep, yep.
You know, so yeah, but as you're saying, you used to be able to be one dimensional. You could just be a striking freak.
Wonder Boy.
Yeah, exactly. But now I think it's going to become a lot harder. And we saw that today. We saw that today
Yeah,
with
very
Usman
true.
and Joaquin
Yeah.
Buckley. Buckley's been on a like world beating streak. He's just been knocking out blokes, fighting all
How
the
bad
time.
is Colby Covington? You know, the
Colby
difference in the you know, when Buckley was against
it
Colby.
really shows.
Because there
It
was a
really
time
shows.
where Colby and Kamaru were on very similar levels, right? They were very, not similar fighters, but they had slightly similar skill sets and similar levels. And, you know, Colby looked awful in there against Buckley. And then
when you watch Colby's fights, he actually looks scared. He looks really scared.
in recent fights.
In recent fights, sorry.
Yeah. In his prime.
Since
no.
the Leon Edwards fight, he's looked really scared.
In the Leon Edwards fight. He looked scared.
In the Leon Edwards fight,
Again,
he was super
Usman,
scared.
Those two fights looked great.
He looked great.
Phenomenal effort put in when he broke his jaw and kept fighting. It was unbelievable.
He is super tough, and he's a really
But he lost that.
great wrestler.
He lost that. It's funny that someone could be ready to die in that fight, right? Like he broke his jaw and he was still standing toe to toe with Kamaru Usman, right? But yeah, you're right. In his most recent fight, he has clearly lost that hunger or that fearlessness.
I feel like the pressure is getting to him. Everyone wants to see him get knocked out. So it's like if Joaquin Buckley was to knock him out, like it would go viral.
Yeah,
like it'd be this big moment.
it's a great
'cause
example.
So many people hate on Colby Covington. So then in his
dangers
head,
of playing
that,
heel.
Yeah, that manifests
Yeah.
into him, like, you know, being extra cautious, especially when he's coming up against Leon Edwards and Joaquin Buckley, which is like, you know, really accredited strikers.
Yeah.
You know,
Which was never his forte.
No.
Always, he had kind of a
His
very
striking-
similar striking style to Nate Diaz. Right?
Agreed.
A lot of arm punches, a lot of
it's always
volume.
looked awkward.
That type of striking that actually Bilal does as well, where you're not quite turning your punches over properly, and you're benefiting from speed and volume at the expense of power. I think that used to be very successful, but I think guys are getting outclassed on the feet when they're not really polished technical strikers now.
No, agreed.
The
We
way-
saw that
yeah.
in the JDM
Yeah,
fight.
for sure. handling him very easily, on the feet. Beautiful display of boxing. Some of the best MMA boxing you'll see in that fight.
How did
dictating with the
Bilal-
jab and just going to the body, and so nice.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Agreed. I can't believe Bilal stayed up. I just in
He's
that
got a
fourth,
huge head. That
he
guy
really does.
It's
It's
a
a big
skull on that
noggin.
man.
And JDM pieced him up in that fourth
Yeah.
and fifth round. I cannot believe he was still standing.
So does Kamaru Usman now fight Bilal? Because they've got a bit of history.
That would be a fun fight. Kamaru Usman wants that title fight. I don't necessarily think he jumps ahead of all the people who have been a lot more
He
active
might from the
than
ability
him.
to sell. He doesn't really
Potentially.
deserve it, but he is a very big name.
Agreed. And if the pieces would have fallen in his favor,
I think he's got to win one more.
Maybe it would go that way. But it's gonna be JDM, Islam, and then it really should be Rakhmonov, who was meant to be the rightful title contender,
and
in the
hasn't
first place.
lost. He just got injured. Or it
agreed.
was during Ramadan, or both.
No. He got injured pretty bad. He had to have surgery, and I think
his shoulder.
I think he's still not training now. Because he had to pull
So
out
he's
of
on the
fight.
sidelines.
Yeah. It was crazy because Bilal pulled out of the first fight because he
Yeah,
injured his
true.
foot,
Yeah.
and then Rakhmonov had to pull out of their fight, and then JDM stepped up.
Yeah.
But now we're looking at the top of the division has a lot of those high level wrestlers there, and now Kamaru Usman's name's in there.
Sean
JDM
Brady, beast, absolute beast.
looked so good in that Leon Edwards
He's
fight.
built in such a ridiculous proportion.
He really is. He really is. He's like the Kelvin Gastelum of the welterweight division. He really is.
But he can fight.
He
and
can.
that's you mentioned someone who fights with no fear, right? That's an example right there. So there's like almost no bad fights to make out of that murderer's row that you have at the top of the welterweight division.
Agreed.
And very quickly it went from like a really unwatchable division to like one of the best divisions, because lightweight has benefited from obviously Tapura and Holloway now being up there, but a lot of them are quite old and past their prime. And a couple of the young guns have come in and lost. So yeah, you probably would say welterweight is up there. I think one thing that you notice when you go back to old UFC fights is, particularly in the heavier weight classes, things get less technical the higher up you go. And I think something that's fascinating about what we've done recently in recent years across a lot of sports is those advancements in training techniques and understanding of how to teach people have meant that larger and larger body types are now able to move and perform in sports like smaller people could in the past. So an example would be 7-footers in the NBA that can now dribble and shoot, right?
Exactly.
And in the UFC, you're seeing guys like Tom Aspinall who have that size of a traditional heavyweight, but they don't move like those guys used to move. Like they were so big and heavy, and they couldn't throw with the same. They couldn't throw combinations. They couldn't throw high kicks. That kind of thing, right? Yeah.
No, they just weren't as coordinated.
Yeah.
But
Now we can do that.
Now it feels like there's no difference. Like it's proportional, and it looks like Tom Aspinall, for as big as he is, he moves the exact same as like Marab does. Like in terms of speed and power ratio, it's crazy.
And that's sports science at work, right?
Really, it really is. It really is. That's a field that you're pretty like accredited in, no?
Yeah, I love it. Yeah. Super interesting stuff to look at. And sometimes, what I think of, we talked about boxing, right? So boxing is one of the oldest sports that there is, right? They obviously did boxing in ancient Greece. So boxing has been developing for a really long period of time, but you still get the sense that boxing, that if you got an ancient Greek boxing Olympic champion, you put him in there with Canelo Alvarez, that there would be a mismatch. But I wonder if that's true, or if, unlike MMA, which is a relatively new sport because boxing's been around so long, is there, there hasn't been as much recent development in boxing. I could make the argument either way.
That is a crazy hypothetical. I've never even thought of something like that. Because you're
unlike
right.
any sport, it was there. They were doing it.
Agreed.
It wasn't that different rules-wise.
Exactly. And fighting, like, it's always fighting. It's always physical. It's always the same.
Yeah.
And, like different rules of different eras, that doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It's always going to be one-on-one, man-on-man, glove to glove. And, that creates a potential for comparison. And I don't know. I really think the Greek guy from 2,000 years ago is getting cooked. I really think so. Canelo Alvarez, they probably, I don't know, who knows what they were doing? Were they doing body shots?
Because that Greek guy was being trained by, he was the representative of hundreds of years of boxing tradition as well, right? It's not like they just figured out boxing. They'd had it for hundreds of years.
Exactly.
But you do get the sense when you watch old boxing fights, from like 1950 to 2000, and you watch them, particularly at the lighter weight classes, there isn't too much difference. You can kind of talk yourself into into thinking that Julio Cesar Chavez could fight in today's lightweight division.
sure.
And Marvin Hagler as well.
Agreed.
Yeah, he
Yep.
looks like someone that you could see fighting today. But then at the heavyweights, though, when you look at a guy like George Foreman, who was a legend and one of the greats, there is a vast discrepancy in the technique between him and Alexander Usyk, for example.
Yeah.
I think at those bigger weight classes, we have come a long way.
No, for sure. And that's, credit to sports science, really.
Yep.
And, the potential for bigger people to move like smaller people.
Figuring out how to get
it's gone so far. And it's made the UFC more marketable, those heavyweight and like light heavyweight
They're the biggest divisions, right?
They really are. And now you're seeing, like really high level talent at the top of those divisions too.
Although the UFC heavyweight division does have problems because
big problem.
If John Jones retires, after Aspinall, there's a big fall off.
There really is. Aspinall looks like the best heavyweight in the world by a mile.
Yeah, whereas light heavyweight's in a much better place.
Agreed. You saw Poatan get dethroned. Now you've got a big
that was an interesting. What do you think happened there technically or strategically? Why did he lose that fight, which was ultimately a striking bout?
He looked off. He really did, Pereira. Yeah. He looked off. Yeah. He looked low energy. He wasn't as aggressive as he typically is.
Yeah.
He never
very hesitant to use his left hand.
Exactly.
Which I think, did he injure his left hand or was
there's always these claims like, oh, he injured his hand.
Hardly through it.
He came in, a bit injured, this and that. But just it looked like in the fight he got tagged by Ankalaev in that second round.
It's hard to come back from that when you get tagged early because you're thinking about it. You're like,
potentially making him more hesitant. Yeah. But he never entered that like Pereira kill mode because like when he enters like that aggressive style of fighting, his hands come all the way down,
draws out the count,
marches forward, and just tees
little
off.
Subtle. He's actually got beautiful defense when you know what you're looking at.
Exactly.
The way he uses his arms as frames.
Yep.
And just little subtle head movement. Just because he's not shelled up, he has an amazing way of defending punches.
No, agreed. And
kind of relies on you having crazy length. That's what I was about to say.
Yeah. No, you're right.
But Ankalaev, striking is a lot better than people realize, and he did thoroughly outclass him on the feet and walked him down. So credit to him, right?
It's crazy that he just stood with him and didn't take him down. And we saw the opposite of that in like the Bilal fight, where
backfired badly,
big time, right?
Yeah,
backfired. I can't believe Bilal didn't take him down.
Yep.
All he had to do was what Kamaru Usman did today, and he maybe could have done it.
He actually did. Like if you look at the actual takedown attempts, he tried to take him down a few more times than people realized.
In the later rounds, in the first two rounds,
but it wasn't working.
In the first 2 rounds, he didn't shoot any takedowns at all. I was literally standing in front of the TV like,
couldn't believe it.
Bilal's
you would have been stoked.
He's about to give up the belt. I actually wasn't stoked because I wanted Bilal. I know this is terrible. I wanted Bilal to win so that I could get exactly. Islam wouldn't move up because
Khabib, very un-Australian.
How fantastic is the MMA storyline? So Khabib tells Islam that he's not allowed to fight Bilal, and Islam's like, "Oh, that sucks." Okay, but then Bilal loses. JDM comes in, and now Islam's allowed to move up, and now we don't get to see potentially the most high-level MMA fight.
Yeah,
in recent memory,
hard to see how that fight could happen now.
Yeah, agreed. Like. In terms of really high level mixed martial arts fights, like where two guys, you're just like, I don't know, this is just crazy. These guys are way too, they're even too good to be in the same
What about
era.
Holloway versus Poirier, right?
That's
I know it's Poirier's retirement fight, but he still looked really good in his last fight. He had a great pair of shorts on.
He did.
Because you always wear them.
I do.
And, that's a really high level MMA fight of two legends, veterans that have, fought so many UFC fights between them.
Great.
They're basically going to strike the whole time. That's a fight to be really excited about. If you like to see high level martial arts.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
They're two of the best strikers of all time when it comes to lighter weight.
He's got more than one fight left here. I don't know why Poirier is retiring.
I think...
He's made a lot of money.
His argument is he doesn't want to fight for anything but titles, right? And he's now
all the movements and machinations. It's like he's not that far away from
it. I know, that's kind of the thing. He's never been out of the picture for the title, but he's fought for the belt now? 3 times.
Yeah.
So, it's not, I don't necessarily think they're going to give him that fourth shot, especially if
he's so marketable.
The thing is now that Islam
now it's a striker.
Islam looked like he wouldn't have vacated the lightweight belt. So Dustin Poirier is like, I just faced Islam. Islam's going to reign for a while. They're not going to put me back in there with Islam.
Fair.
So, I'll do one more fight and retire. But now Islam's up and he beats
Max.
If he beat Max and Tapori is a champion. You want to see Dustin.
He's beaten Max twice, so it's very doable.
I think Dustin does beat Max again. I think
Their weight of shot was so different. When they fought their second fight, Max was actually landing, but it just when Poirier hit him, it sounded different.
it really did.
Yeah.
It really did. It was, I think, because Holloway's now committed to a move to lightweight, he's going to become a lot more like filled out and defined, just like
He has
was
got a
for
big
the
frame.
Gaethje fight. Exactly, and he can get a lot bigger than he is at featherweight.
Yep.
And I think having that extra weight in this Dustin fight will help him a lot, and it can go a long way. I still think Dustin gets it done though. I love
Which would be
Poirier.
awesome. What a storyline that
It
would
really
be.
is.
He's a legend. He's paid his dues.
But like, does he? If he beats Max and Taporia becomes champ, or even Charles, like rematch between
Doesn't
Taporia
matter,
and
either
Charles,
one.
it's still
Yeah.
fun. Like if he was to beat,
He would know this. Yeah, this wouldn't be news to him. He'd be training in there training. He's like, if I win this, like,
I could get another title fight.
Yeah,
And I
dreams alive. He'd be so hungry.
if he was able to pull it off, the
Yeah.
story, it's unbelievable almost. Like the story of his life, it's that's
And just-
why MMA is so compelling, in my opinion.
He's such
And
a
it's
great role
boxing too.
model, right? Out of the cage,
Agreed.
but also in there, like the amount of times he's been put under extreme duress and pressure. Like a recent example is against BSD, right? He's in there against a former special ops guy, someone who's killed people,
Yeah.
right? And he gets so badly beaten up and put through the ringer in that first round. And there's no quit in him, there's no fear, and just the way he gets to work in that second round and pounces on his opportunity. Like it's a real life warrior.
It really
Yeah.
is. It really is. I love when we always watch like Benoit Saint Denis fight. They always talk about like, oh, this guy's killed people. He's been like French Marine, and they
Yeah.
always like introduce him like that.
Yeah, yeah.
It's
Well, it's true.
it is. Oh
If
no,
you're
I'm not saying-
fighting
I'm
someone,
not-
and you're like,
I completely agree. It's legit
That
experience.
would be, that would be a factor.
But when you think about like martial arts, that's not necessarily
it's a great equalizer.
Yeah, it really is, because if you talk about someone with like 14 years Muay Thai experience, been a black belt since they were 16 years old, been training under this trainer, etc. But like I've served in the military and I've been face to face and met death. That's a different person.
When
It really is.
you fought, what weight class did you fight at?
I fought at 66 kilos, which is featherweight.
Featherweight.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah,
Right.
which is not too hard for me.
that
to
wouldn't
make.
be an arduous cut for you.
Nah, it's
No.
not. I'm only like 71.
We could make you into a bantamweight.
I really could if I really wanted
Yeah.
to, but like
Be a hulking bantamweight.
10 kilos, like losing like
Is it? No, it's not 10. Is it?
Oh, yeah, 'cause
Oh,
I'd
it
have
would
to-
be,
because
right?
bantamweight's
I thought
like
bantamweight would be 60 kilos.
It is. But
Yeah.
that's
Okay.
10 kilos.
Oh, so you're 70 kilos.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. I'm like
Gotcha.
71, 72 kilos.
Yeah, we could do it. We could do it.
Oh no, I
We'll
could
put
do
you
it.
in the sauna.
I could do it.
We'll
It's
lock
just-
you in the sauna.
The problem is you're so much more susceptible to getting knocked out when you're
Yeah.
dehydrated like that.
Yeah.
And I think 10 kilos, like, I'm not a big guy as it is. That's a lot
That's
of
true.
my
That
weight.
is a lot.
And because how much water weight do I have? Maybe like 5-6 kilos,
Max.
which brings me
Absolute
down.
max.
Yeah, absolute max, right? Absolute max. But that would bring me down to like featherweight, right?
Yeah.
And so I can rehydrate and be okay with that. But if I'm losing more than another 5-6 kilos more than that,
Yep.
that's where it could be a bit dangerous. I feel like I wouldn't feel myself.
Yeah.
And like in the like I've won fights, I've lost fights, but at that 66 kilos, I felt really good.
Okay,
I feel
that felt like
myself.
you.
But by the time I step in the ring, I'm already 71, 72. So
Yeah,
it's a bit
and
different.
and you're probably a little bit bigger and carry a bit more muscle now than you did back then. Because
Yeah.
how long has it been since you fought?
Last time I was in Thailand was September 2023.
Okay,
So,
yeah. So it's been a while. It's
No,
coming
it
up on
has.
2
It
years.
has. I've been.
Do you want to get back into it? Do you want to get back into MMA? What's your attitude?
I'm looking to have a fight early next year. I wanted to have a fight
Okay.
end of this year, but I think early next year makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Me and my coach
In
were working
Thailand?
through it. I don't think so. I think it'll be here.
Here.
Yeah.
Okay. Have you fought here before?
No, I haven't.
Never?
I only fought
Okay.
in Thailand.
Do you have an MMA gym that you have your eye on that you want to start
I used
training
to
at?
train. I used to train at the UFC gym
In the city, yeah.
But I've been taking a break. I've been playing footy last year, doing
Yeah.
a whole bunch of crazy things, traveling, and so I couldn't necessarily
Climbing Everest.
couldn't necessarily commit to a schedule.
Yeah.
So now I'm really excited to train at one of these gyms on the northern beaches, like
Yep.
Apex or some of the great jiu-jitsu gyms that they have here, Muay Thai gyms like Bulldog and things like that. I think that
Yeah.
makes a lot of sense, somewhere local, and just build out of there and have maybe a Muay Thai fight
Yeah.
or MMA fight towards the end of this year, early next year.
Yeah. How would you make that decision between doing a Muay Thai fight or an MMA fight? What's your like skill set and fighting style? And,
I think MMA is the most fun because it's the most creative.
yeah.
It's like, mixed martial arts, in my opinion, is really an art, and you're able to express yourself freely through movement. And I think MMA provides the least amount of rules and the least amount of constraints around that art for you to express yourself as naturally as possible and
Yeah.
as best you can. So I really like the sports of martial arts, like Muay Thai and Jiu-Jitsu, and the nitty-gritty of it and all the technical things. But I think mixed martial arts, from a creative perspective, from an expression perspective, is the most fun.
Yeah.
So I would look to try and do an MMA fight. But if they got a Muay Thai competition coming up and they got tournament style, I love a tournament style fight, because that's the most fun.
For sure.
And-
That's amazing when people
and-
do that.
And,
Yep.
and the thing about Muay Thai is not as grueling as an MMA fight. I know it's still striking.
And the
it's
camp as
yeah,
well.
yeah, and the camp isn't as tough, because you're like, locked into one discipline instead of, a variety of different disciplines that you need to be well versed before you go do MMA. But I think, Muay Thai, they just do like 3 rounds, 2-minute rounds. You do one fight. If you win, you go on to the next one. You do another 3 rounds. Like it's a bit of fun. But MMA, it's not like that at all. It's 5-minute rounds. If you gas out, you're gonna get finished. It's not gonna be good. You've got to really pay attention.
Terrifying.
And your training will back you up. And if you train properly and you have the right people around you, then you'll be less nervous of that. But I think more people are more nervous about gassing out than they are of getting knocked out in MMA.
Yeah, you got to manage your gas tank, right?
For sure.
And just put you on blast. Yeah, your striking does kind of bear out that interest in being natural, because it's you're very much entering a flow state when you're doing your thing. Like, it's really good to watch.
No,
very technically well rounded. Great at mixing up the different strikes and throwing in the kicks and the knees.
You're a great striker too.
Just boxing.
You're more conventional boxing is what I was about to say.
Yeah, very limited.
Tell me about your journey with mixed martial arts, like your personal journey. When did you start training?
I was introduced to it by a friend who, like you, did a few kickboxing fights. And also by a different friend at a different gym who had done a lot of boxing, and he kind of took me under his wing. So like a lot of people, you get introduced to it through friends, and then they teach you what they know, and then you're off to the races. I love it. I think as someone, I love all sports. So I've played a lot of sports throughout my life, and love watching sport and everything about it. And if you do have that genuine interest in sport, I think it is inevitable that you become interested in martial arts, because in a lot of ways it's the highest expression of sporting excellence.
It really feels like that to me. It feels like everything's on the line.
Anyone who's a sports fan, you could get them into martial arts if you go about it the right way. It's just like, what fight do you show them? How do you expose them to it?
If you love physical movement,
Yeah.
and you can get over the violent nature of it, then you'll love it. I think the violence is a hard thing to swallow. And I always say my absolute least favorite thing in the world is senseless violence, but my favorite thing in the world is organized competitive violence.
Yeah,
and
a contradiction of terms,
it really
but
is.
it makes sense to me.
Exactly. Because like I don't want to see two people who aren't of the same skill level fight. Even like when someone's going to get cooked in a fight, even in UFC level, where they're feeding like a guy who's on his last legs, like maybe it's a retirement fight, and they're feeding him to like the up and coming
Nate Diaz versus Hamzat Chimaev.
What are they doing, right? And when you see that, you're like, this isn't mixed martial arts anymore. This is one guy beating up another guy, right? That's what it feels like to me sometimes when you watch something terrible.
Manny Pacquiao about to fight again. Have you heard about that?
I have.
46 years old, looked terrible 4 years ago, going in there against a world champion. I think that had all the makings of exactly what you're describing, where it's going to be a bit hard to watch. Love Manny. 8 division world champion. So
the GOAT. Really,
one of the
GOATs, for sure.
And just the way he went about it as well. He was always trying to finish the fight.
Yep.
I love Floyd Mayweather. I actually love watching him and his skill set defensively, but he was playing to the rules. He was playing to the judges, and he was trying to win on the scorecards.
Exactly.
Particularly in the latter period of his career.
Floyd he's like that. You know what I mean? Yeah. That's especially.
But there's a beauty in that.
Oh,
there's
there
a lot
really
of skill
is.
in that, because they all knew, all of his opponents, when he was in Money Mayweather mode, right? He was having issues with his hands. His hands were pretty brittle, so all of his opponents knew that he wasn't going to try to knock them out. That he was only going to try to, hold on, evade, score points.
Yep.
And yet none of them could knock him out.
It's
and
crazy.
these were great fighters that were amazing at knocking people out, and they couldn't touch him. They barely even landed clean on him.
No.
Only a couple times.
He was like the perfect strategist for all that type of stuff, inside the ring and out of the ring. Like fighting people at the right time too. Like fighting Canelo when he was young and a little bit inexperienced, and he knew he was going to be great eventually. Right? Even little things like
when
that.
He fought Manny.
Yeah. Well,
even though he's older than Manny.
Exactly. Like, he was pushing that back a long time to try and get, the right circumstances around the fight.
He was very strategic.
Even having like fights where he probably knew he was going to win, like, but that were also going to be big promotions, like the Conor fight, like the McGregor fight, right? Where
I think any boxer takes a fight against Conor McGregor at that time.
Conor McGregor's a good striker. I don't want to say any boxer.
He looked
but
all right in
but
the first
a
round.
world
Yeah.
championship level boxer.
And
yes.
all of them are going to take that fight. They're going to be like, yes, please.
Agreed.
It
And
just made sense with
It was probably
Floyd.
one of Floyd's biggest paydays too, which is crazy. When you
One of
think
the biggest,
about
pay-per-views.
when you think about like the skill level in that fight, like the discrepancy between
Yeah.
the two, whereas so many other better boxers had faced him but earned so much less money.
Great example of what you were talking about, where the problem of gassing out in a fight, right? Because Connor actually looked okay, and then he gassed
And then he
out,
gassed
and
out.
it was just over. Like,
Nah, it
that's
was-
such a scary thought.
You see it. You literally see it. You're like, oh, is he starting to cry? Oh yeah, he's done. And
It was
that's over.
that fun.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Like it just happens.
Yeah.
And when you're a fighter, you know it
Know that
because you
feeling.
felt it
Can't
before.
help
If
it.
you have pushed yourself, you know.
And
what
he
it
would have
is.
trained really hard. He would have had some of the best boxers. Obviously, he's a great
100%.
martial artist, or was a great martial artist at the time. And yeah, he still happened. It's
Yeah.
still gassed out.
And
he
it's
still do it.
When you're a martial artist and you see it happen like on the TV or whatever, you know that feeling. Like just to quit within yourself and to know that you're done. And and if you push yourself the right way and you have the right training partners, you should be able to find that place within yourself in the gym and then excel in competition and try and
Yeah.
avoid it in competition.
Yeah.
So
You see it less and less, but it does still happen every now and then.
Oh, for sure. It happens at the highest
Yep.
level. You see
In the
people in
title
main
fights, yeah.
events.
Yeah.
Title fights, gas out in like third or fourth round, can't hack it, and they're done.
Yeah.
Like even the fight that you brought up before, like Dracus versus Adesanya, like the cardio on that display in that fight
Yeah.
was actually pretty crazy.
Yeah.
Like if you
Adesanya's always had really good cardio.
agreed, but if we watch the third and fourth round of that fight, it's a sloppy fight.
Yeah.
Like they're both,
Very
both
true.
gassed.
And that kind of is what did Adesanya in.
I know.
His hands were down a little bit low. He just got a bit lazy getting
And
out of the
DDP's
way.
awkward style of just like
Yeah,
running
it's a
forward with these crazy
technique,
hooks,
isn't it?
Yeah, he literally like runs forward with his head down, like trying not to get kneed in
Winging
the face,
hooks.
winging punches, and if he misses the punches, then he just dives on your legs, try and takes you
And
down.
he'll probably take you down.
Yeah, exactly.
But he's a beast
He's one of the best martial artists of all time. Like,
Yeah.
oh, sorry, best martial artists right now.
in the world
Yeah,
right now.
in the world right
Yeah.
now, for sure. What do you think happens in that Hamzat fight?
Yeah, it's a great example. I mean, who have we seen that can actually stop a fresh Hamzat's takedown attempts?
Well, Usman could in the second and third round,
But not in the first round.
but he had no chance.
He got
in that
mowed
first
down in the first round. So can DDP be the one to do that? I don't think he's had to show a lot of takedown defense previously. He's normally been the one that's trying to take people down. He's fought a lot of strikers. And so I haven't really seen that side of his game tested, which I think Hamza is a really special talent from a wrestling perspective. So yeah, I could see him doing a lot of damage in that first round. But every round starts back on the feet.
Agreed.
So
I think if that round goes past the third round, then Drake is going to win.
yeah,
Because I think he's a cardio machine.
he actually does it
too.
really good for that size. He's a big boy.
And I reckon for that size, yes, Hamzat might be able to get him down in the first two rounds, but after the third round, way too slippery. Like Drake is going to be drilling. He's drilling takedown defense right now as we speak, and he has been.
And he's a very
since
hard
that-
worker.
Yep, since that Strickland fight, he knew Hamzat was next.
Yeah.
He's going to be working on it. But the thing is, for that 5 minutes,
Yeah.
Hamzat's the scariest
He's like a
wrestler in the whole
missile.
world.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
he just
amazing.
dives on your legs, gets you down.
So aggressive.
Yeah.
He's still big for that weight class.
Exactly.
Despite having used to be a welterweight.
The fact that he made welterweight was crazy.
Well, sometimes he didn't.
Yeah, exactly.
That's your own personal problem.
Yeah,
bro.
thank
Yeah.
God he didn't fight Nate Diaz. and then Nate Diaz has this great moment against Tony Ferguson, right?
Yeah,
Like, what a
yeah,
great
true.
switch of timelines.
What a
right?
legend. Yeah,
Yeah.
both of them.
Oh,
the
for
Diaz
sure,
brothers.
for sure.
Yeah.
And then
That's kind of something, a downside of where UFC has gone is you're going to lose those sorts of characters out of the sport because you're going to create a system that, or sort of a meritocracy from which kind of more and more robotic personalities rise to the top.
you're right.
And that's kind of inevitable. Happens in a lot of sports. You could see it happening in the NBA at the moment as well. Yeah.
Agreed. And I think, what makes fights so interesting is that personality, that storyline behind it. And if that, fades away because it's so scheduled and everyone's on this regime, and we have sort of seen that the UFC's kind of like started doing that in areas that really matter, like the weight cutting and the nutrition before they fight.
Yeah.
They have like certain protocols and they give them like
Well, they don't let them do an
Oh
IV.
no, not allowed to.
right?
Well, because that's kind of cheating though.
Yeah.
Like like doing a weight cut is silly before a fight anyway, right? But an IV increases the chance of people doing steroids and things like that, and it's it's not a USADA approved or whatever.
Yeah.
They got rid of
They got
USADA
rid of
last year,
USADA,
but
yeah.
what is it, like the Free Drug Agency or something now that they're using, which is still a third party tester that does
I wonder
random
about
testing.
how good they are at their jobs, because I mean, fighters spread all over the world. Are they really doing a lot of out of competition testing that the fighters don't know about?
And that's what they always talk
That
about.
would be very expensive to do.
Agreed. And that's why they always have like these fighters fighting in like mystical lands, like the Dagestani mountains and like Kazakhstan and stuff. Like, are people really getting over there? Like, if you've got an American passport and you're with USADA and you're trying to get into Dagestan, are the people at the airport really going to let you through?
Yeah, I wonder about that.
There might be a bit of talk going around like, yeah, if these people show up, they're not allowed in. Don't let them in.
I guess we would never know.
We wouldn't. We really wouldn't. Because the UFC is not going to come out and say, by the way, we can't test these fighters.
They don't say anything.
No.
There's like no information about what the actual testing regime.
I think there are.
Is right
there
now.
are stats. Or right now, it's who knows what's going
Yeah.
on. It's the Wild West. But back when they had USADA, they had like the tally of how many times.
How many times you've been
And,
tested?
like, I remember this one stat: Yuri Prohaska had been tested like 64 times in 1 year or something crazy, and like the average for UFC fighters like 5 times.
What?
It was crazy.
Why?
Try and see if you can pull this up, Carl. Yuri Prohaska got tested by USADA like
You live in-
64 times.
Do you live in Prague or
Yeah, he lives. He's from the Czech Republic, so I assume he lives in the Czech
is
Republic.
that just where their office was?
I
It's like
guess.
Yuri coming again.
I
We got to
guess
bump up
so.
our numbers.
Yeah, the quotas are down. We'll just bring him in
Yeah.
again. We know he's easy.
Bring in the samurai guy.
Yeah, he is a funny dude. He's
He's a
great.
unique personality.
And one of those guys that really embodies being a martial
Did I
artist.
see he turned down a UFC light heavyweight title fight against Ankalaev to finish his exams for his uni degree? Did you hear about that?
See if you can pull that up too, Carl. That is absolutely insane.
Isn't that crazy?
Oh.
I can't believe that from him. Because you think his martial arts is very important to him, but he prioritizes getting the uni degree over, a title fight that he was lucky to get. That story can't be true. Yeah, because he would know that. Otherwise, he's probably 2 wins away from getting a title shot. Right? He's got to beat Jamal Hill next week, I think. No,
That's
that's
Roundtree.
Roundtree.
Yeah.
But so he's a couple wins away. Prioritizing his education, in a way, it's smart because he's already relatively old, and so how many more fights does he have? So maybe he feels like he needs to have that business degree. But I don't know how important getting a business degree is. And
So that's
64 times.
Yeah, come on. What did I say? 62? I was close. In 2022.
more than once a week.
Yeah, in 2022. And so the next entries were from
Paulo Costa?
cyclists
That's
and
probably
then Paulo Costa, yeah.
Yeah, probably a good
But
idea.
most fighters only got tested like 5 or 6 times that year, which is crazy. Well, okay, we're talking about Yuri Prohaska and we're talking about education a little bit, but I want to switch from the UFC yarn
Okay.
because
Okay.
we've been on it for a while. But education,
too much
we could have too much fun with this all day. But you mentioned you had a PhD. I never.
I was
about
in the
you.
PhD program. I ended up graduating with a Master of Research.
Wow.
Because I got a job here back in Sydney, and it was a job that really excited me at the time, and it's gone fairly well so far. I did the PhD program because I got offered it. It was a scholarship. It was an opportunity to travel. I never had that much interest in doing research or being a university professor. And that was only reinforced by my experience in the program, talking to a lot of professors who really talked me out of it. They're like, this is not a good profession to get into. We have to deal with a lot of bureaucratic stuff that you're not going to want to deal with. There's not much future in it. So they were like, run,
Yeah,
And
wow.
I heard that like 5 or 6 times from these people I really looked up to, and I guess it got through to me. So that was, but I still, I had I loved my education, learned a lot from it. I think I was at uni for like 9 years total or something. Wow. And so, I loved it. But would I recommend it to other people? For me, it was a way to travel and just to satisfy my own intellectual curiosity. But how important is it in your career or in setting up for life or about learning things? I don't know. I could go either way on it. I think it depends on the person. But for me, it was great.
Tell me your whole kind of educational journey. Sort of like, what did you study originally? Like bachelor's degree straight out of high school.
Yeah.
And then like with the research that happened at the end, like your master's and your PhD,
Yeah.
what were you researching?
So my initial background was in ancient history and Latin American studies.
That's awesome.
Yeah, which was really cool. Then I did a Master's of International Relations.
Okay.
And then the PhD, or ultimately the Master of Research, was in geopolitics.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Wow. That's a great field.
It was a great field. I don't use any of it now. in my current work, which is in the finance industry.
Mm.
But, I guess I learned a lot of important skills and, maybe things I take indirectly into my work. But yeah, none of those things have proved useful in my actual career, which might lead some people to say, see, going to uni is stupid. So yeah, and they're entitled to that, and some people can do really, really well without going to uni at all. So I'm not really big on like forcing people to go to uni or anything like that.
But you have such a well-rounded character and you're very well-rounded intellectually. Like you seem to know a lot about a whole bunch of things. Like we were talking about the Cuban Revolution before and you talk about it like, it's straight out of the textbook.
Oh, huge history nerd.
Yeah. And I think ancient history is so exciting. And I think it's kind of having like ancient history is really getting some limelight these days,
It's always been there. It never went away.
It's definitely never been
always
away.
been a deep, particularly in the West, there's been always a deep, deep cultural interest in ancient Greece and ancient Rome. And that's kind of mirrored what you see in the East. The Chinese continue to be fascinated by ancient China and by Confucian philosophy and so on, right? So each of our, in a way, rival civilizations are kind of obsessed with their own distant past. In China, that can get really interesting because, China is one of the oldest continuous civilizations when you think about it, right? The United States is 250 years old or so. Even British civilization.
A little bit older.
Right? But China has been a continuous civilization. They had their century of humiliation and they've had regime change, imperial change, structural changes. But yeah, there is a continuous civilization there. And that's really, really fascinating when you think about it.
Oh, it really is.
Yeah.
And the fact that when we're talking about ancient history, the terracotta soldiers only got discovered, in the last couple of decades. It's amazing, and how much
There's
is
still
left.
unopened tombs.
Exactly.
There's still unopened rooms. Rooms they won't go into.
What's
in those rooms?
This is the thing. There's so many undiscovered sort of like, rooms, underground cabins.
Like they know they're there and they're like, no, it's like too sacred for us to go in.
Exactly. And it's like, what's going on? And you see this kind of pattern both in Mayan culture, in that Aztec realm too. There's a lot of those like kind of secrets around. And same with Egypt. There's all these like secret passages and things that people aren't necessarily allowed in. But I think, what's been awesome to see in the last maybe like 4 or 5 years as ancient history really rise to the top with like people like Graham Hancock and like Randall Carlson. What do you like? Do these people have merit? Do you consider them considering you're coming from like a traditional background of tertiary education? You have your by degree you were trained in ancient history. Do these people do these journalists who don't have a degree or don't have, archaeological, roots, do they have a right to speak on this type of stuff?
Well, Randall Carlson is a very celebrated geologist and one of the best in the field. So the academic system and the academic community, are there structural aspects of that system which will cause new radical truths or new discoveries to be resisted and to be suppressed? Yes, there are, because you've got this academic community which is populated by people who got their PhDs and made their names on certain facts or things that we thought were true at the time, right? And then someone comes along with evidence of facts that contradict, or, with discoveries that contradict what their research background was in. And that completely discredits them professionally. And they lose their livelihood, lose all credibility as a result of that. And so those people do act as gatekeepers, and they do cause, in a number of different academic fields, it could be STEM fields, could be anything.
Yep.
They do, in fact, cause those kind of new discoveries to be suppressed sometimes. However, there is still, the truth will prevail in a sense. Like if you do come with enough good data for whatever it is that you're trying to assert, then eventually they will have to come around to that. Like, we're not so closed-minded where there's going to be no more discoveries or anything like that, right? Like, you could prove those people wrong and put those experts and professors out of business with your new discovery if the science holds up. And if you're running experiments that are repeatable and so on, right? So that's the important thing to acknowledge about the system. Now, the problems that Graham Hancock and Randall Carlson identify seem to be really valid. These problems with our established timeline of civilizational development, this idea that, well, hang on, if we only started living in large settlements and having specialization within our communities in 4,000 or 3,000 BC, that doesn't really make sense when we've got these older structures that seem to
Tepe
be,
and things like that.
Yeah, exactly. That seem to have been built by communities that had a specialization of labor, right?
Yep.
It's clear that in Göbekli Tepe that some people must have been tasked with building while other people were tasked with farming. Whereas the established timeline would be that at that time we had hunter-gatherer communities, right?
Exactly.
So they're identifying valid problems with our timeline. Particularly Graham Hancock. Graham Hancock's suggestions are pretty radical, I would say.
For sure.
So he identifies the problem, but the hypothesis he suggests is quite outlandish. This idea that there have been repeated extremely advanced civilizations. And he's even suggested at times that there was close continuous contact with aliens, and that there was like telekinesis and telepathy involved as well. Like
his older books got pretty crazy.
Right. They get real crazy.
Whereas his Netflix documentary is a little bit more.
He's toned it down a bit more recently.
Yeah, on the straight and narrow.
So though, I mean, maybe that's true, maybe it's not, but that's that's probably a bridge too far for me. But I think the problems that he identifies are certainly valid. And advanced civilization prior to the civilizations that we know about, could that have existed? It's pretty much impossible for it to have been an advanced civilization that we would recognize as advanced and to have nothing show up in the archaeological record. Like if there was an advanced civilization, they weren't using anything that was made of metal, for example, because there's just none of it. So that's where it gets a bit murky. So maybe it was an advanced civilization in one sense, but not one that we would recognize as advanced, because they just didn't have any stuff, it looks like.
Agreed. Like you have to question where are the ships, where's
anything?
Where's the technology, where's the metals that they would need to construct.
We've never really found any physical artifacts that can really make us question our timeline of humans' development. We've never found something from 20,000 BC that is like a really finely crafted metal object or something, right? Which makes us think, wait, that doesn't make sense. So we've never found that, but we have found structures, large things.
And we have found strange, like innovative things that we wouldn't have expected, like the Iranian battery. I don't know.
The computer, coil, right?
This jar that from ancient Mesopotamia, where they had this jar and it had like a coil running down it, and it was constructed in a certain way. If you put like acidic juice in there, like lemon juice or something like that, then it would like generate a small electrical current.
Amazing.
But like that's not the narrative. That the narrative is we don't have electricity until thousands of years in the future.
And Nikola Tesla had this idea about the pyramids having something to do with
a lot of people
charges in the ground and so on, and he was obsessed with that.
Agreed. And like now there's all this like discussion about underneath the pyramids there's all this like unmapped area, and they've got these things that drill down like 10 kilometers and things like that, all these crazy things, and we don't know if it's really like, it's hard to know. Like the LiDAR, it shows it's there, but then the community's kind of like, oh, is it really there? Is it an error? Is it this? Is it that?
And the Egyptian archaeological establishment, right? What are their incentives in a situation like that?
They're not too excited about
they would be extremely resistant to it.
Exactly.
And that's a really important force. What are the incentives of the different powerful groups of people that are involved, right? And that constrains the amount of work that can get done on these ideas.
Well, Zahi Hawass, he's been leading the
super open-minded guy.
Not exactly. I wish. It's such a shame that we don't have someone open-minded in that sphere who's who has power to actually demand change.
Someone who's open-minded would never come to power within that system, because the people that assign the power would never want someone like that to come in.
Agreed.
Like a bull in a china shop, they wouldn't want that.
No, agreed. They have a tight narrative that they're sticking to, and anything that contradicts that is going to be.
Whenever you work within a closed system like that, and you want to go up the chain of hierarchy, right?
It'll be met with resistance.
You got to kind of play the game
for sure.
We work for large corporations, same sort of thing, right?
No, we do. We do. Tell me a little bit about your corporate life too. Like, what's that journey looked like for you? I know, like, you're very well rounded, and I know that like your work is a big part of your life too, and you're very professional.
For sure. Yeah, take it super seriously.
Yeah. What's that timeline look like?
I was very lucky. I got a big leg up through a friend who had progressed to a fairly senior level at the company, and he managed to get me a job there. So I was able to skip a couple of steps, and I'm really, really grateful for that. And I definitely acknowledge that. I think, it's important if you find success in anything to always acknowledge the help that you got from other people. If you're standing on the shoulders of giants, or you got really lucky, or whatever it might be. That's something I really admire, actually, in people that become really successful, and then they're asked about it, and they make a point of always attributing a lot of the credit to luck or to people that help them out or anything like that. Because sometimes it can go the other way when you become really successful. You start to think like, I have the Midas touch, like I am special and I was successful because I was always going to be successful.
Yes.
And I'm just amazing. So that would be the first thing I would say about my corporate journey. And because I got the job for that reason, because a friend put in a good word for me, that really motivated me to try to do a really, really good job right from the start, because this person had stuck their neck out for me, and they ended up paying huge dividends. And so, yeah, it's been really good.
No, that's good to hear.
Yeah.
It's so good how your network can inspire those opportunities, right? And
Networks everything,
it
relationships
really
everything,
is.
right?
And you know, somebody else putting their name on the line for you really inspires you to get after it.
It
right?
does.
And
It did, yeah.
It's a testament to that friendship and like a testament to how well they know you, and they know that they can stick their neck out for you and you're going to deliver. Like you're not going to let
So
them
true.
down. So
So
they
true.
trust you in a lot of ways, like, you
Yeah.
know, and get a lot out of it as well as you do. You know?
Yeah, no man is an island. I think something I found really insightful was someone who was making an observation about billionaires, right? And sometimes on particularly, you know, the left wing parts of society, you know, they have this thing about like kill the rich or eat the rich or whatever, and like billionaires are terrible people. And someone who was friends with billionaires and had access to those sorts of circles was saying like, actually, to become a billionaire, which is one measure of success, but to become a billionaire as an example here, you have to have a lot of friends. You have to have a lot of people supporting your success. You have to ask for a lot of favors that are then granted by people. And so actually what is the case is these sorts of people, they are very driven and they can be cutthroat when they need to, but they tend to be people that have for a long time prioritized their personal relationships and built out a really close network of trusted advisors and supporters and investors or whatever it might be. And so, and that made a big impact on me. It's like, oh, it actually does take a whole village, and no one is an island.
And it really is important to stay grounded in that, because as you said, you can get the Midas touch and think that you're just
It's all me.
the gift to the world and it's all through you, you know, but you forget that you're a product of your environment and who you spend time around.
Yeah, that kind of
Shape
hubris never ends well, right?
No, it doesn't. And it seems to infect at all levels of power. You know, you see people in power, the same sort of story. And you'd think that, you know, people who get in there, they probably have good intentions going in, but human nature takes control and no one's irresistible to it.
I'm not a big Stoic, but one concept from Stoicism which really made an impact on me was that idea of equanimity, where it's this idea of not getting too low when things are going against you, but also not getting too high when things are going for you. So trying to maintain this this kind of ambivalent attitude so that, you know, so that you can be shielded from some sorts of the ups and downs. I think there's like a really famous poem which is like, you have to treat both victory and defeat just the same. Treat both those imposters just the same. I butchered that quote, but that's the idea. Yeah.
No, I hear you. It's important to stay humble in that nature, you know, because to not get obsessed with your own ego in victory and not get too down in the dumps when it comes to defeat. And martial arts is a great manifestation of that, right?
Point. Yeah, it is, because you face both of them often. I think people generally need to work on one more than the other. Some people will get really down on themselves and create this kind of vicious cycle. And so those people need to kind of, you know, embody a little bit more of a confident attitude. But then other people will go too far on the other end of the spectrum as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, that idea of martial arts doing that for you and you were younger, right?
For sure.
So was martial arts a great way of building humility in you when you first came to it? Or was it a great way of building confidence because you were someone who lacked confidence?
Both.
Yeah,
Actually, I couldn't say that because I never really lacked confidence. I've always been,
Always been
when it
naturally a
came-
fairly confident person.
especially when it comes to, you know, social interaction. I've always been confident.
Yeah.
But physically confident for sure. You know, it gives you a different kind of like way to approach life, you know, because you understand that you're capable in ways that other people aren't capable, and you can defend yourself.
Superpower.
It sort of feels like that, but at the same time, because you understand violence, you understand its like terrible nature. So that's why like you don't want to see it in everyday situations. Like I've never been in a street fight outside of like
The
gym.
beeline bus.
Yeah.
Are we going to tell that story? On?
I guess so. You brought it up. One time I was like riding home on the Beeline bus with my mate Joel playing chess. And Joel, I'm sure he's watching the show. He'll remember this. And we were playing chess on the bus on our phones next to each other. And we were chatting a little bit of shit, getting a little bit rowdy.
Against each other?
Against each other.
Yeah.
We're getting
And you
little bit
being
rowdy.
you had to be super competitive about this game of late night chess.
I love chess.
Yeah,
I'm like
right?
a big fan of chess.
Yeah.
I really like it. We should get a chessboard for the studio. It'd be a lot of fun.
Yeah.
But anyway, we're talking a little bit of shit to each other, getting a little bit rowdy. We've had a few drinks. It's maybe midnight. There's not too many people on the bus, and we're sitting at the front section of the bus. All of a sudden,
Upper deck?
Upper deck.
Yep, yep.
All of a sudden, this guy comes up from behind us, and we're talking to each other, and like no one else is really talking, but we're not being rude or like super rowdy or inappropriate or anything like that. This guy comes up and he's like, "Hey mate, what'd you say about me?" And I'm like, "Oh, sorry,
Damn.
I'm talking to my friend. I'm playing chess." And he's like, "Nah, mate, you and I are gonna fight. Next stop, we're getting off." And I was like, "Bro, like, what are you talking about? I'm just playing, I'm just playing chess here."
But also, we can do it. Like,
No, I don't want to fight anyone. I really don't, because
Yeah,
that's not what mixed martial arts is. When it's different skill levels, it's not fun to watch.
No.
When you see Nate Diaz versus Hamzat Chimaev, if we did see that fight, you don't want to see someone just get the shit beat out of him for 25 minutes, right? It's not fun. That's not what martial arts is about. It's not competitive. I love competitive martial arts, right?
Yeah.
I don't like senseless violence.
that's a bastardization of it.
Exactly. And this guy's drunk. He stinks of alcohol. I'm not.
How could you have thought you're at the front? You're not even facing this
I
guy.
know.
You thought you were talking about him.
It's so strange. But these
Yeah.
things come out of nowhere.
They
Like, this
do.
isn't the first time
Yeah.
this has happened to me. Like, it just randomly happens.
Yeah.
Like, it really does. And I'm like, am I really gonna have to fight right now? This is crazy. Over
your-
this?
Your fight or flight instincts kicking in.
And I'm like, no, like, this guy's about getting
A
knocked
little
out
bit of you
for
is
no
excited
reason.
about this prospect.
Yes.
Yeah, that's normal. That's like someone who's trained.
No, but it's
because
not
when you're
good.
training,
I
you are.
don't
kind
want to
of-
hurt. I
No,
don't want to
totally.
hurt anyone. But you are right sometimes.
And what ended up happening?
I was able to resolve it. So anyway,
Yeah.
we're on the bus. He's all up in my grill, not letting it go. I can't diffuse it with words. We end up, he's like, next stop, we're getting off. Next stop's the mall, which is where I get off. My car's parked there. I'm driving home. So I'm like, all right, sick. Get off the bus. And him and I are talking, and he's like getting really up in my face. And I'm like, I could just push this guy, take him down, and just like it would be over, right? But I knew that was going to be terrible, because I knew, like, if punches are thrown, if there is like physical violence, I could be on like charges for assault.
sure.
I go to
You
a
guys are on
police
concrete?
station. We're on concrete. It's just a terrible
can go real
situation,
bad.
and that's why I like really hate violence outside of the fight gym. I really do. Like, it's not worth it, and I would have run away. Like, if he was if I couldn't resolve it with words and I wasn't able to talk him out of it, I would have just run away.
Yeah.
Because that's better than going to the police station.
Best
it really is.
technique of all.
Yeah, no, it is. I got a good 40-yard dash. I can get away from people.
Yeah,
I'm,
yeah.
I'm small. I'm little. I can just like zap away.
Yeah.
But I can also get my knee to touch your chin. You go to sleep.
Yeah, I believe you. Yeah, that flying knee, you can do that off both sides, eh?
I do love my
Yeah,
flying knee. I
you're
love
kind of you're kind of able to fight out of both stances. I can't do that.
It's just practice.
I'm trying to get better at the southpaw stance,
Yeah.
but I am so much better at orthodox.
It's just hours. It's
What-
just
but
hours
you know,
of
like,
standing in the
very-
wrong stance, feeling
Yeah,
awkward.
it's so uncomfortable.
It sucks. And you're like, but the thing is, you have to be training with people that aren't going to hit you hard, because
Yeah.
this is the problem. Most people don't fight in their opposite stance, because when they are sparring and things, they get nervous because they feel uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Right. So they're like, oh shit, I don't want to stand like this. I don't know where to put my hands. I'm nervous. I could eat a liver shot, anything. So they're like, all right, I'm switching back to normal. And then they never,
much better.
and then they never, and they're like, okay, I'm comfy.
Yeah.
I can defend myself. I'm not going to eat a head kick. I'm
Yeah.
fine.
Yeah.
Right. But then they never actually practice getting better at switching stances.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to have training partners that understand, hey, I'm working on my opposite stance right now. Please
Take it
go
easy on me.
conventional and just, go 20%. Please just let me develop this. So it's just hours and reps in the gym. Like, for me, it was really just like just hours upon hours upon hours. And then eventually it clicked. Eventually it was just like, oh, I feel comfortable. I feel like, like when I'm switching
You
stances,
can use the advantages of that.
my hand stays here. This is now my jab hand. This is now my power hand. My hips are, I've got the same torque that I have when I'm standing conventionally. And then, you start with the jab. You start with the 1-2. You start with low key combinations, and then eventually you throw on flying knees off your opposite stance.
Yeah.
So it's just hours in the gym. It really is, and just practice.
In MMA, something I really admire is when you see an MMA fighter who's at the highest level, fighting in a title fight and they're willing to fight out of both stances. And they're
Oh.
willing to fight. I really admire that because I think that takes so much dedication. And you know, coming from a boxing background, very few boxers actually can box out of both stances equally. It's basically no one today at the highest level that can fight out of both stances except for Terence Crawford.
I was just about to say Crawford
Yeah,
is the one.
that's really the
guy.
only one. Yeah, I think Canelo loses that fight, by the way. Huge Canelo fan. I think that's the one.
I think he does lose that fight.
You know, someone who's never been dropped in their career, let alone stopped. I think that's where it all comes to an end.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, but I think it's a fight he had to take because he had kind of been cherry picking opponents for a while, and he needed one big fight. And I think you know, he's going to make over $100 million or something from the fight, so he's getting well compensated. But I think that's the fight where you're watching it, and he'll be on the canvas.
As we said, boxing is so unsustainable. We can't keep doing this. There needs to be a dedicated league where these fighters get paid a reasonable amount of money.
I think that's Dana's plan. His plan for boxing isn't to create a boxing promotion that attracts all those major stars that are already used to being paid hundreds of millions of dollars, tens of millions of dollars. He actually has a plan to start a league and then build up stars from scratch again.
Yeah.
And accustom them to. And the thing about boxing being unsustainable is actually a lot of boxers don't earn a lot of money. It's just like these probably 10 or 20 boxers at the top of the sport that are demanding too much money to make the fights that the fans want to see.
Yeah.
But actually below that, you know, a mid-level boxer versus a mid-level UFC fighter, I suspect the mid-level UFC fighter gets paid more.
Yeah, you're probably
In
right.
Dana's defense. So, yeah, so I'm excited for that. I think he'll do well at that, and I think boxing does need that. Because even me as a boxing fan, you know, say the Canelo versus Terence Crawford card, I might know the last 2 or 3 fights, but I have no idea who any of the people on the majority of the card are. Whereas a UFC main event, I know most of the fighters on the card. And that's because Dana has done a good job of building up their storylines and building a roster of stars where, you know, fans do actually care about a large proportion of them.
Yeah, instead of just 20 people who are just hoarding all the money at the top, and they're just the same. It's kind of like that same club. And to get into that club, you have to do so much. You have to be undefeated. You have to have all these.
Yeah,
like,
undefeated, right?
And it sucks because it breeds this culture of like the guys, like the best guys in the world, not fighting the best guys in the world because everyone wants to stay undefeated, because the only way to get that $100 million check is to be 50-0, right? Yeah, like Mayweather or whatever. Like like Mayweather put the blueprint out there. Like, here's how you become an amazing fighter. You're undefeated.
You pick your fights.
Yeah, you fight like tomato
safe.
cans. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's terrible.
Yeah.
And it really has ruined boxing. And as you said, I think the only way to solve it is someone like Dana, an outsider coming in from the ground up and building up stars and you know, starting from scratch. You know, and hopefully that happens, because I love boxing so much and it doesn't get as much as attention as it should. And a new league and competition in that league is exciting.
Yeah. Speaking of industrial transformation, something I wanted to ask you about, because I think you would know a lot more about this than me. What do you know about AI?
I know quite a bit about AI.
Yeah. So what are you excited about? How would it affect you in your life? Do you use AI?
Well, let's talk finance, I guess, for a little bit, and then we can kind of develop from there, because we, you know, something that we both can relate to.
Yeah.
Right now, we're probably working with tools like Microsoft Copilot, ChatGPT, Claude, these like generative AI, you know, large language model type things. That's kind of phase 1 as far as I see it, right? Probably going to be in this phase for about 2 years. Then we move on to like this ability to create your own AI agent, right? That probably comes in like 2-3 years. That's phase 2. This like AI agent, there's this thing called Copilot Studio that Microsoft is working on. It allows you to create an AI agent that does the task for you using everyday language and everyday prompts, English prompts, like just the way you use ChatGPT. So you could set it up. If you have a task at work where you have to email these 2 people, get information from them, put it in a PowerPoint and send it off, you could teach an AI bot how to do that without coding or any of that garbage. You could just like go, this is my Outlook emails, this is what they do. When as soon as you get it, put it in here, and you could just tell it in easy language, and it would be able to execute for you. So I think those are the first 2 phases, and then phase 3 is kind of like the integration of that. I create a like AI system, and then you create an AI system. Those 2 AI systems are able to talk to each other. So now the managers that you're sending that picture to, they've got their own AI system that communicates to this one, and they know that when they're going to receive that, they need to go forward that on to 6 more people, or do this with it, or like, you know, do analysis of it, all this sort of thing. So it'll become an integrated integrated network of AI agents. Economy, and then unfortunately,
that's a lot of job loss.
That's what I was about to say. Unfortunately, phase 3 is when people are going to go, oh shit, like, I don't have a job anymore. That's when people are really going to start switching on. Whereas people who know the timeline or know like a rough timeline, I probably put this whole phase 1, 2, 3 on a 5-year timeline. By 2030, we're probably going to see like, you know, the white collar job, mass redundancy narrative really become real. And that's been kind of teased at us for a long time. But I think with the speed that AI is developing and so much investment from especially the US and China on this, it's a different game. And I think we both like work for large corporate companies. And I think there is a timeline where, you know, the CEO of that company gets a note one day saying, hey, with this new Copilot update, with this new AI ChatGPT update, we can eliminate 50% of the staff at the company, really. And
That's a huge cost cut for them.
And with the way that the market is structured, where the investor always comes first,
and your competitors do that? And you're competing with your competitors who have done that?
The same time that the CEO of any company gets that note is the same time that all the other CEOs of the big... like,
this is a simplification, but that
is
it's so accurate and so plausible to me.
You know, it is... It opens up a new chapter of human intelligence, like an integration with artificial intelligence. So that's like from a finance perspective. That's the corporate kind of plan. It, like not plan, but just the inevitability. Stretch that out over how many years? Maybe it takes 15 years to hit this phase 1, 2, 3 because there's regulations, there's this, there's that hold it back. But I think this is an inevitability.
I don't think a regulation is going to be too effective in this space.
I'm just saying I don't want to be held account like, by 2030 I'm saying that this is going to happen or anything like that. I think these 3 phases are inevitable and each have their own timeline that they adhere to. And I'm not a fortune teller. I don't know exactly what's going to happen and how fast things are going to move. But just by the way I'm seeing things, that's how I'm seeing it play out in the corporate world. And it actually becomes a conversation. There's been so much conversation about the AI and its capabilities. But I think the people that really know AI know this plan. They know that by 2030, we're going to have a real problem, not just in the company that they work for, but across all companies and across all industries, right? And this isn't going to be a private problem. This is going to be a public problem. When this happens and AI is at that level, the government's going to need to step in because we're going to have that many people are going to be laid off. Like it might be, the Anthropic CEO the other day got on and told us that, by 2030, there's going to be 20%, 25% unemployment and 50% reduction in white collar jobs. Yeah. He probably knows what he's talking about more than me. And that's pretty scary. They have been saying that for a lot of years, though.
Not that long. They haven't been saying that for that long.
But they kind of tease you with it a little bit. So, I don't know. And, I feel like they say that every 5 years. Same with kind of quantum computing. It's always, quantum computing is only 3 years away. We just need to work on the cooling units and get these qubits going.
Teslas.
Yeah, exactly. But it never really manifests into reality until it does. And I feel like, I was kind of talking about this on the other episode that we had the other day, where all these technological kind of advancements are happening at the same time and manifesting into this new age of tech that is so unfamiliar to how we function today. Like blockchain, crypto, all that is blowing up right now, absolutely going off its brain. And, in a lot of ways, as it should. AI also, as we just talked about, going off its brain. And then when you get to robotics, another crazy one, biomedical engineering and CRISPR technology, gene editing, longevity, all that sort of stuff it's all kind of manifesting at the same time. And it's very scary that we're going to be
the rewards of it soon. Will be very unevenly distributed, and the costs of it will be borne by the working and middle classes of society, right?
It feels that way, and it feels like it's always kind of been that way. And the more that tech evolves, the more that gap is going to become more pronounced. You know what I mean? And it is a shame that it's structured that way. I think there is a utopia where AI exists and we also exist too. I think AI could, in some ways where human nature fails, AI can come through. I think, because as we talked about before, power corrupts, and it doesn't necessarily matter what type of power that looks like. If power manifests in so many different ways and it corrupts the mind in so many different ways, I think AI is kind of invincible to that. But it's not if it's sentient and it has its own motives. So then,
that's a whole other thing.
But then, can it even become sentient? Are we even able to create consciousness in that way? I don't know. But I think as we were talking about before, the advancements in AI are getting so much heat, so much hype. Everyone's talking about it. Not enough people are talking about what we're going to do when we get to 2030. That we need to restructure our economy and the way that we do things to exist in this new world. And people are kind of just this AI thing's here, but I'm just going about my my life, and apparently ChatGPT is going to steal my job, but I don't really know, and it's going to become very real very quickly for a lot of people. And I think there's not enough talk about it because the people who are in charge kind of know that it's going to
Keep it
happen.
on the hush.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
we shouldn't talk about this
If
too
you
much.
were sitting on something that you thought was going to radically transform society with a lot of negative outcomes for people in a few years, you would probably be kind of coy about it as well. So that makes sense.
But we
Yeah,
can't be. We can't be.
No.
That's how we get trapped
For sure.
in it, you know? And that's how we let the wealth disparity get so bad. If we're able to address this head on and say, look, there's this new profound technology, we're going to have to restructure the way that we do things, and we're going to have to be open and honest about it, right? Then that's a better framework than just shutting our eyes, putting our head in the sand. And, you know, most people end up on the wrong side of the coin, you know?
Yeah. With AI, so there's two core problems to it. Is like the structural changes in the economy, and then that kind of existential threat of the singularity, right? So we're talking about the structural changes in the economy. Some people will push back on that kind of hand wringing and say, look, you know, we've had a lot of radical transformations with technology in the past, and they always led to, you know, more wealth, more success for society as a whole, you know, improvements in our quality of life, and the job losses were offset by job gains in new industries or whatever that is,
Yes.
right? You know, you could talk about a lot of different transformations over the last few hundred years that have had people worried in that way. How do you see that?
It'll be interesting. I think AI gives us a chance to focus on things that are like early stage AI phase 1 and 2 allows us to focus on things that are more creative, more like analytically focused, more human-minded thought, right? Whereas like a lot of the robotic processes and the process work involved in a lot of corporate jobs, that will be handled by their AI. But now we're seeing that they're very creatively capable too, these like AI machines and these large language
They're good
models.
at that.
Yeah. So it's going to be very interesting to see if people can reskill and, you know, reshape the way that they do things. And this is kind of like one of the reasons I started up the podcast. Finance, in my opinion, finance is a bit of a dying industry with AI and with like, it's not a dying industry in terms of its importance. Finance will always be important.
Yes.
Currency is always going to run the world, and that's always going to be at the forefront of the entire business landscape, right? But when it comes to finance professionals, that profession is going to change more than anything else, I really think.
I think you're spot on.
Yeah, because when you're talking about marketing or something like that, yes, they might have like AI generating the ads, and you know there's going to be different ways that that's structured. When you're talking about finance, like from a, you know, accounting perspective, from a business analytical perspective,
They're ripe for disruption.
it really is. It's ripe for the machine mind, something that can be on 24 hours a day, not take breaks, be interconnected with all the systems, and limitless in its power.
Yeah, and do you think if like, with the, you know, the highs that AI stocks are trading at on the exchange, do you think that's a bubble? Do you think there's like a .com bubble where, you know, the internet actually did end up being extremely transformative, but there was a .com bubble because it wasn't really ready to deliver on the expectations of people at the time, and a lot of things became overvalued, right? Even if the core principle of the internet being amazing was actually correct, right? So there was a .com bubble. Is there something similar that could be likely to happen with AI?
For sure.
Too overvalued too quickly.
Agreed. And you've got like these large corporations at like such a high profit to equity ratio. It's insane. Like the highest we've seen ever, really. Like off the charts. But
Did you see the acquisition of Scale AI by Meta during the week?
I did.
Fascinating story. Like Alexander Wang, right? The founder of Scale AI. What a story his life has been, right?
Get into that a little bit, because I did see the takeover, because Dana White now sits on the board of Meta. So that's
Does he actually?
Yeah. I don't know.
Dana White sits on the board of Meta.
That's
no,
true.
that can't be right.
Carl, pull it up.
Really?
Yes.
What a bizarre thing that is.
I know this sounds crazy,
Wow.
but like Dana White's kind of like Meta's diversity hire a little bit. Like I feel like
Hilarious.
they're very
hilarious thing to say about a white billionaire.
I know that sounds crazy, but they're a very like liberal company, whereas Dana, he's very MAGA, I guess you could say. He's quite
I think Duck's
Republican.
coming around to that.
Well, yeah, I think so too. You know, well, I think the thing with the thing with these tech
I
billionaires,
missed that. I completely missed that. That is amazing.
yeah,
So Alexander Wang was the son of two physicists, Asian American guy on West Coast, and he was obviously a maths genius growing up and represented the US maths team or whatever when he was in high school. And he went to MIT after high school, but he hated college and he dropped out really quickly. He was, I think, roommates with Sam Altman, I want to say, briefly, but he dropped out, and at age 17 or 18, maybe by the age of 20, he had decided he wanted to start an AI company, right? And this is in like 2017. Okay. So in 2017, he sees AI coming. He sees large language models coming,
Wow.
right? I didn't even know what a large language model
No one
was in
did.
2017,
No one
right?
did.
And he is like, I'm going to create, I believe, and I'm not an expert on this, but he's like, I'm going to create models that can help people train these and strengthen them and put them through different computations and so on. So it's like it's a set of data parameters that allow large language models like what Meta have to train their models and make them better. And that's what his company Scale AI was. And by 2020, the company's valued at over $1 billion, right? And it only reached at last year evaluation maybe $4 billion. And then in the last week, Meta has decided to buy 49% of the company for $14 billion. Wow. So that puts a company's valuation of $28 billion, right? Remember when Meta bought, or Facebook bought Instagram?
Yep.
And it bought it for $1 billion, right? From memory, I think. And that was a huge acquisition. They have just bought half of an AI company for $14 billion. And they are already using Scale AI services, right? They were already a client of Scale AI. They bought it so that they could take their top staff and move them into, because I think Alexander Wang became the head of Super Intelligence, which is a cool title.
Yes.
Very cool title.
Super
Yeah,
intelligent.
what do you do? I'm the head of Super Intelligence. I'm smarter than you. So they bought. It was like an acquisition.
Yes.
To bring on their team, but just like those numbers, they don't seem sustainable.
No.
Yeah.
No, it really doesn't, and that's why I do think it is a bubble. It really is. 14. That was a great example that you had there with that 1 billion investment in Instagram, and we've seen.
And Instagram was huge at the time and has been huge.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And now like Instagram's bigger than Facebook by far.
Oh,
when you
much so.
when you,
Yeah.
especially if you think about,
When was the last time you used Facebook?
no one uses Facebook these days. It's
In Asia, it's huge.
Yeah. That's the thing. In other, like, especially in
certain
the
countries,
West,
it's
in the
huge.
West, it really is Instagram.
Yeah.
But in other countries and other regions of the world, Facebook gets a run. It really does, and they have a lot of power, Meta. And I think this $14 billion investment, it's like a testament to the hyper bubble that we're in right now. It's like remember where crypto was in like 2021, 2022, where it was just like crazy out of the blue. Like Ethereum was now $5,000. Like it's just unsustainable overnight. It just felt like, I feel like we're kind of in that first phase now where it'll be like, oh, this AI thing's crazy. And then it'll be like phase one will kind of teeter off and we'll get used to the ChatGPT lifestyle a little bit. And like Amazon will come out with like a talking speaker and you can talk to it and ChatGPT will be on there. But it'll be like very basic, and then we'll ramp up again into phase 2 and 3, which will be very real for so many people who like aren't like, they don't know the timeline. They just think like, oh, ChatGPT, they understand like, oh, it's here now, but they don't understand that this is the first step of
what that could become.
Yeah.
This is the worst it'll be. This is the least integrated our lives will ever be with AI ever again, right?
Exactly.
There's also an interesting angle on that Scale AI acquisition, which is the argument that, it's kind of disappointing that Alexander Wang is obviously, a revolutionary, a visionary, that he decided to just join Mark Zuckerberg instead of saying, no, I'm going to take him on and beat him. Because, Mark Zuckerberg, when he was starting Facebook, he had a lot of opportunities and a lot of people that wanted to join with him or wanted him to sell to them. And he kind of stayed true to it or whatever. And now he's built something huge. So is it like disappointing that, if you're Alexander Wang and you're at Scale AI and it's growing really well, really radically, and Facebook comes knocking and offers you $14 billion for half of your company and for you to go work for them, do you say, no, I'm clearly very much onto something here. I should stay and build my thing up or my empire up so that it rivals theirs?
Yeah.
But have we let Alphabet and or Google Alphabet and Meta get so big that now they can throw an amount of cash at someone who would be their competitor in the future? They can just throw an amount of cash at them that they can't say no
they
to.
can't say 14 billion. What are you gonna do?
I don't think his stake in the company was relatively small, but the numbers are still insane.
Yes.
Is that a good thing when these companies have gotten so big that they can swallow up or, whenever their competitor might be rising, they can just nip it in the bud?
No, it sucks.
It's a bit dystopian.
It really is. And it was like exactly what we were talking about with like the Craig Jones Invitational versus the ABCC.
You're not going to see that.
You can't have the monopoly of just like Meta, Alphabet, Amazon running everything. That's it.
Right.
And any tech company that comes out of the ether, they're just like, all right, sick, $20 billion, we'll buy that. So we have no competitors. because like that's not a good landscape to
It's
have.
illegal on some levels, but they're very good at doing it in a way where
They're so
it's
sneaky.
Yeah,
That's what
yeah.
they, that's like their business. Their business is controlling the tech world and making sure that they're the ones coming
They're
out
in
with
everything, right?
They really are.
Like Amazon, produces a crazy number of the top movies of last year or something. Yeah, yeah.
Like they're so diversified. And I just saw this today. I think they just put $6 billion extra into the Australian economy to build AI data centers in Sydney and Victoria. Sydney and Melbourne.
Really?
Yeah. So
$6 billion.
They're
That was
not
probably a small
they're not
investment.
just investing.
Why would they do it here? When
I think they've
our labor costs would be pretty high, infrastructure and property would be really high, but we've got fast and reliable internet.
I think okay, so I read the same article already said that they'd already put $20 billion into this investment project.
Yeah, but why not build it in India or build it in it's so interesting.
Having the data centers local it makes a big difference, I think.
Yeah, okay.
Carl, could you look that up and make sure, like, what are the benefits of having local data centers? Because you're right, if you did have
Seems like there's a solid argument to put it somewhere.
speed to customer is what
So
Carl's saying.
these data centers are to service the Australian market.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, sorry. They're not building them to
service
export them.
global.
Yeah, this is like, to benefit the Australian.
Which they are making a bet on being big enough to justify that investment.
Well, they're also making a like big bet on our energy as well, being able to like generate enough energy to like, sustain these giant data centers.
That's the thing about AI, isn't it?
It really is. And
The
it
energy
requires
usage.
the energy usage is going to be insane. The thing about it though, people always talk about that, like, oh, like AI, it's bad because, like it's going to use all this energy. That might be true, but AI is inevitable. So we haven't. So therefore, AI is inevitable. Therefore, an energy crisis is sort of inevitable too, right? If one's going to happen, and it's just a matter of time until these tech companies make it so undeniable that
They're gonna find that energy somewhere.
Oh,
yeah.
Well, I think. What do you think about renewable energy, nuclear energy, that sort of thing?
Yeah.
Oh, hold on. Before we get into that, Carl's just pulled something up. So, oh wow. So Amazon, just as we're talking about that, 3 new solar farms in Victoria and Queensland will be their infrastructure expansion. Okay, here it is. Yeah, Amazon plans to invest $20 billion to expand data center infrastructure by 2029, strengthening Australia's cloud and AI capabilities. So it's actually $20 billion. I thought they initially.
I like how they say strengthening Australia's cloud and AI capabilities.
But
It's also on the
actually
Amazon website. Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so some people will get their jobs in this.
Yeah, Amazon
but
actually just want
this
to
is
own
not
all.
good.
They just want to own all the data. This is actually like, who knew? Who would have thought that our data would be the most valuable currency going around, right?
And that's the thing about Amazon, right? AWS and like
Exactly.
their data centers. That's actually their real asset.
Same with Google, like their search engine. It's all the data. That's what they sell.
But literally the cloud services they offer and the servers they offer as well, right? Both of them.
No, agreed.
huge
What have you got here, Carl?
investment
Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese. Yeah, this was at the Amazon headquarters. I saw this today, and met with the CEO to discuss the deal. Like, I think.
I mean, given the economic realities of the world, is the Australian government cozying up to Amazon a bad thing? I would say no. I think it's a good. I think you just got to accept that they're the biggest player in town, and so I see the pragmatic approach of what he's doing there.
Agreed. And this technology is inevitable, so therefore we have to face it head on and we have to be an
I
innovator.
mean, you have to be partnering with those Magnificent Seven.
Agreed.
Right? Yeah,
You have to. It's inevitable. You do.
They're
And
so big now.
They're so big, and they control.
You're not going to be able to fund an Australian tech startup and then bet on that growing. No, it's just not going to happen.
It's not going to happen. That would be irrational. And to put the fate of the country in the hands of that plan is not a smart idea either.
Yeah. And you were talking about energy?
Yeah, I was just about to get back onto the energy production. What do you think about renewables? What do you think about nuclear energy? What do you think about traditional energy, coal, that sort of thing? What are your thoughts?
Yeah.
How are we going to fund this AI revolution?
I think that China, because by virtue of its totalitarian government, will be able to make the transitions to clean and renewable energy and potentially to AI much faster and more effectively than any democracy will be able to. So I think it'll cause a shift in the balance of power internationally towards China, as long as they can keep their economy afloat by other means in the interim, because they do have some structural problems with their economy.
Big problems.
Yeah, big problems. Real estate and the real estate collapse being an example. So I think that they will be the leaders in it, unfortunately. Wow. I'd probably prefer them not to be, but
I definitely see it differently.
Okay.
I don't know. Are they going to be the leaders? Who's going to win this AI arms race? US, China? I don't know. But I think when it comes to renewable energy for China, I think they're not as in as you think.
Okay.
They're kind of like in from a media perspective. They come
Yeah.
out every couple of years and say by 2050 we're going to be all renewables, this sort of thing. But
Yeah.
if Carl, you can pull this up, they open up new coal plants all the time.
Oh, for
And
sure. They're playing both sides.
they're playing
not
both
doing it out
sides.
of virtue. Or
No.
Or anything.
But they're doing it out of like their totalitarian nature. Like they're trying to get ahead. They're trying to do what's necessary. And right now, for them, the best way is to just produce as much electricity as possible, which means using both renewables and coal.
Yeah.
So,
but I think their adjustment to renewable energy and the new economy that AI will create, they'll be able to do that adjustment in the same way like when there was COVID, right? They were able to change their population's behavior so effectively because they don't need to worry about people's opinions. There's no election cycles to worry about. They can put in place very damaging short-term structural changes because of long-term gains. They can just make those adaptations a lot quicker and easier, and that's what survival in a post-AI world will reward economies and countries that are able to do that, right?
yeah, and to like sort of control and mobilize their populations in the right way. Whereas the
Click of the
West,
fingers.
they don't have that same control.
No, this, obviously democracy is a much better way of doing it, but this idea of, elections every 4 years, so you can't really institute anything long-term structural because you're worried about winning the election in a couple of years. It's something that probably doesn't get talked about enough. I think in some countries they have a 5-year cycle.
Yep.
I actually wouldn't be against that for that reason.
It's very hard because like you even look at like dictators who have been in power for like 20, 30 years and you think, when it comes to their ability to run the country, they must be so much like more well versed when like in comparison to a president who's only been there for like 2 years. And
Oh,
they're
great
not going to
point.
be there.
Yeah, right.
Someone who has a lot of connections, a lot of experience. Like the problem is those totalitarian leaders typically aren't.
terrible.
It's not good. It never ends well because power corrupts, right? And we were just looking it up. China has 1,161 operational coal plants as of July 2024. So they're not slowing down when it comes to coal, but they say that they are. But I think you are right in a sense where they're going to be able to mobilize quicker when it comes to things like AI, renewable like electricity. But
there's no discussion.
As you said, they've got some serious structural problems. I was actually this is a serious conspiracy theory, and the CCP hate this. But there are conspiracy theories that China's population is actually not 1.3 billion. It's as low as 300 million, and they've been covering up all this time. I'm not saying I believe this.
Brand new conspiracy theory. I love it.
Okay,
but talk me through how they could have done it.
Carl, I'm gonna need you to support me with the evidence here while I try and get myself out of this.
He's gonna need to hop on the dark web.
I'm not saying I necessarily believe this, but
that is wild.
But
So the
argument is they essentially cooked themselves with the one-child policy. They kept the one-child policy in
takes
place.
a long time for these things
In place way too long. They like in the 90s they had the opportunity to get rid of the one-child policy, and they kept it all the way up until 2016 until they finally
still let
abolished
people
it.
leave.
They like agreed, but okay, so this is the real crux. There's some real evidence here. So based on a country's population, they're going to consume a certain amount of salt per person. Everyone needs sodium, right? And like there's an average in terms of numbers where like per person there's an average amount of salt that you need to consume. So they're able to figure out the population of a country based on the amount of salt they consume. 2019 they did a study, and apparently China's population was only 850 million to 900 million back when they were claiming they had like 1.3 million before 1.3 billion before COVID, and then COVID they've lost a lot of people and they have empty cities. And this is the theory.
Millions of people.
This is the theory.
Tens of millions of people.
So China population numbers fudging. Yeah, so and this is the thing. Apparently the CCP has been fudging these numbers. This theory claims that the CCP
if you have been
fudging these
fudging it for
numbers
a long
years.
time, then the discrepancy could broaden. And I see the incentive lined up for them to fake that.
Carl, I'm gonna need more than the Google search. You're gonna have to
There's probably
give me China population conspiracy.
Are they?
That's what I want to see.
Are their numbers accurate? No, but going from 1.3 billion down to 300 million, that would be.
That's the most insane.
Yeah.
That's the most insane, and that's what these people are claiming. But if you really get into the nitty gritty, it has a lot of problems.
Closed system, and we might think we know certain things about them, but as with
here we go. Give this one a go. Give China is hiding a population. Oh, that's a little while ago.
The thing with conspiracies, and we've spoken about this before, is the the bigger a secret and the more people that would have to know about this secret and stay quiet, the less likely the conspiracy theory is true. Like the US didn't go to the moon, right? A lot of people would have to know about that and be in on that for a long time, for decades now, and none of them have come forward and confessed on their deathbed or whatever, right?
Exactly.
A secret like that about China, you're talking about at least thousands, maybe tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people would have to know about that, and they're all quiet about it. That's almost impossible, right?
Agreed. And I think like that's the real evidence against it. Something like that would be so widespread.
Fascinating idea. And you know, is China fudging a lot of statistics about its economy or about its population? For sure, they would be. About COVID, yeah.
That's the thing. It raises an important point that like, who knows what we're getting from the CCP when it comes to their data? You know, it raises an important point. Like, even when it comes to something as basic as population numbers, should we necessarily believe what they're pumping out? And I feel like I'm talking about China with a lot of negative energy right now. Like, I'm not trying to, like, I don't want the world
to... is very anti-China.
No, but I don't want them to be our enemy. But they're kind of being poised as if they are, you know? And I don't think like this whole world is like, we're not meant to be enemies. I don't believe
we shouldn't
so.
do that.
But the way that it's shaping up, they are. Like, you know, like in the West now, Russia and China are our enemies. And the West are our allies.
And as long as we still trade with them. So before the 1980s and the wall started crumbling, the Iron Curtain started having holes in it.
Yes.
There was what life was actually like in the Soviet Union and how the Soviet Union was actually doing. And then there's what the US, Europe, and Australia thought the Soviet Union was doing, what they thought they were capable of, and what they thought life was actually like in Russia, right? And then when the Iron Curtain came down, it turned out that for a long time, the Soviet Union had been struggling on basically every metric economically and socially, and that their secret police was nowhere near as pervasive as we actually thought. It could be possible that something's happening with China. Yeah, it's just an example of...
It's just, for me, it's like an interesting thought experiment.
Yeah,
like you can't trust, you know, anything that comes out of there.
Yeah.
And
just kind of critically examining your own beliefs and
exactly
thinking about it. So what did we find out? Did we find out?
Go back to that article, Carl. Let's see if did we find anything compelling, or am I just spitting the worst yarn of all time and their population?
You have actually just made up this conspiracy. Like, you're the first person.
No,
this is ground zero.
I've been watching too many videos on Rumble or something.
On what?
On Rumble.
What is Rumble?
It's like speaking about competition, it's a YouTube competitor. So
wow,
yeah, it's like a video streaming platform. Like,
would a video like that get censored on YouTube?
Yeah, well, that's the whole reason Rumble kind of like rose up, because it has
Rumble.
this.
I've never heard of it. Amazing.
Like this right wing sort of thing.
Lots of people are investing in Rumble stock just for that reason.
Yeah, so it's getting a lot of media attention, Rumble, and you know, I think, as we've talked about before, competition is good.
Yeah.
It you know, forces YouTube to maybe, you know, get some guidelines down and let people be more free in their speech,
which is a
and
good
in their
thing,
videos, which is a good thing. So yeah, competition's never going to be bad. Hold on, let's have a look at this. So
100 million people.
100 million people fewer. Okay.
Still a lot of people. That's 4 Australias or 3 Australias, right?
Look, I was reading something else, but maybe I'm completely incorrect. Who knows? But I think, you know...
Let's go over there and count them. But, you know, that theory about, or that technique of counting how much they would need per person of a certain commodity, that would be a good way of estimating their population, because you could look at things that,
on that, Carl,
you know, maybe if it's not salt, but something that China doesn't produce itself, you can look at its importing numbers, and then, there would be a way that you can conduct that study to figure it out, to get a ballpark.
No, I promise I didn't completely make it up.
Yeah.
Are there any conspiracy, like talking, not necessarily about just China, but conspiracy theories in general? Are there things that you're like, you know, this, I really do believe this ones that seem more legit than most?
I believe in UFOs.
Fair.
I'm not sure what they are, but I believe in unidentified flying objects.
For sure.
So I believe in those, and I think a relatively, no, not a likely, but an interesting hypothesis is that UFOs aren't aliens. They're actually people in the future that have figured out a way to time travel back in time. And that's why they minimize their contact with us, because they don't want to, don't want to have a butterfly effect on us. I think that's kind of reasonable.
Super reasonable.
Yeah.
That makes so much
even
sense.
if it takes us 100,000 years to figure out how to travel back in time, they would then be able to come back to us, right?
Exactly.
So it doesn't have to be, you know, what would the state of technology be like in 1,000 years? What about in 100,000 years? There's just no way for us to, if we manage to exist for that long, there's no way for us to conceptualize what technology that community would have.
Yeah, exactly. It's sort of inevitable. Hold on. What have we pulled up, Carl? So while tracking China's population by salt consumption isn't a direct method,
this is going
high
on.
salt intake is in significant health concern in China. Okay, all right. I'm off this chat. But, okay, China's population is 1.3 billion. I'm wrong.
So you've just shown your anti-Chai bias even more. We've just found out that they're taking in too much salt and you don't even care. You want to move on.
No.
This is a serious health concern.
I feel like, to be honest, I was lucky enough to go to Japan earlier this year. And I feel like certain Asian cuisines are really processed. Like in Japan,
I expect you to go the other way and talk about how great the food was in Japan. But
I feel like if you're eating the right things, it is. But a lot of their food is really,
and yet the
highly
Japanese
processed.
are the longest lived population.
I know they've got such a long longevity.
what's
But the
going on
thing
there?
is, you see them; they're super skinny. None of them work out. They've got like a bit of a running culture. Like I see a few people going for runs and stuff.
Okay.
But no one lifts weights. Not many people do like martial arts or sports or anything like that. Really. But yeah, it's crazy.
So they eat a lot of processed. I thought they ate a lot of seafood. I thought they don't eat that much.
No,
So
they
the
don't.
daily
They don't
calorie
eat that
intake,
much. They have a lot of healthy, sustainable.
But there's
carbs.
a lot of salt, a lot of
Well, like their bases are good. Like they're like rice, sweet potato when it comes to like cabbage, when it comes to carbs, that's really good. And like lean, healthy proteins like chicken and seafood is really healthy. But a lot of their food, because like their population's so big, it comes in like these little packets. And like because like it's in the packet, you don't know what's in there. And if you read the ingredients on the back, it's all this processed garbage.
I didn't know you could read
really
such
is.
good Japanese.
Well, I just have the Google Translator little app, I've always wanted to learn a language, but I'm not dedicated enough to. I don't love it like I love I don't love it enough to get
You
good
got
at
to
it.
need it. You
Yeah,
gotta need to
yeah,
do it.
yeah,
And then your brain
exactly.
kicks into gear. And then
Exactly.
you can learn language really fast.
Yeah.
But we just have to drop you in back. You're going back to Tokyo. We're sending you back to Tokyo.
I don't want to go back.
And this is relevant, but you can take podcasts now, and there's AI programs that'll translate the podcast into a different language.
Yeah.
So you could record this podcast with us speaking in English, but then you could create Spanish versions or Japanese versions where they're speaking with our voice, but they're doing it in Japanese or Spanish.
It is
You
crazy.
could increase your total addressable market by a lot overnight.
Carl,
right?
you got to take some notes.
Because I know the people of Japan want to hear this conversation.
I hope
so.
so.
They are hanging on every word.
But in the joke, I've already set up auto captions for 14 different languages.
Wow, that's
Nice.
crazy.
Okay.
Carl, he's a wizard at this type of stuff.
Yeah,
I couldn't
clearly.
do this. I couldn't do this without him. I really couldn't.
Yeah.
He's
The
a real
unsung
hero.
hero.
No, he really is. I hope to sing his praises. I hope to have him on the show quite often, so
Yeah.
that like people can understand how cool he is, just
Yeah.
like we know. So yeah,
Yep.
yeah. Like I think when it comes to conspiracy theories, like so many of the like crazy ones, like I just dropped right now, with this
That's a
China
great
one,
one.
right?
I
So
love
many of
that.
those discredit good ones, though. You know what I
That's
mean?
true.
Like
Yeah.
with
What are
all
the good
this,
ones?
well, like UAPs, it's pretty hard to think that something isn't going on there. There's been so much evidence come out in the last 2 decades
That they
where-
exist.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that something's going on and we don't necessarily understand.
And it's not much of a leap to, okay, they exist and the government knows more than we do.
Yes.
I think those are both two very reasonable things.
No, agreed. And like, how much do they know? How long have they known it for? Do they have, like,
Why do we
recovered
care so
crafts?
much? Why are we so fascinated?
Because it's like, it plays into absolutely everything. If these people are time travelers, that means we've unlocked, the ability to play God, to go back in time. Something that we would never fundamentally be, like,
and
have
they
the potential
still
to do.
allowed Hitler to live.
I think to some extent, if you were to create time travel, you would be very against changing anything that put you on a different timeline where you were unable to invent it. Because if you were able to create time travel, you would understand that the timeline that you're on currently is maybe the only one that you were able to develop that, or maybe the one where you were the first to develop that. You know what I mean?
Right. You're the first to develop it, right? And you take very good care of your time machine. Yeah. You are very responsible. However, you then die of old age, right? And someone else inherits the time machine. 1,000 years later, your time machine technology is still around.
Yes.
And you think in that period of time, some people have been irresponsible with their time travel.
And you're right to think like that, because we're talking on an infinite scale if we're talking about time.
Because they can always come back.
Exactly. So if time travel, so maybe that's the best argument against time travel. If time travel was to be created, eventually that technology would be get out of hand. If that technology was to get out of hand,
It's similar to the
we would know about
simulation
it.
hypothesis.
I think the simulation hypothesis it has real legs. I really
Yeah.
think it does. And I'm a Christian man, and I
Yeah.
say that.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
I think both can kind of coexist in a way, in a very, very strange way.
Yeah.
But I think the simulation theory is, you know, it really is. Oh, what's Carl pulling up here?
He's
Black holes and
nudging us
white
in a
holes.
certain
He's
direction.
trying to get us to speak about cosmic events and
About
things like that.
what black holes are. You can get into like what is dark matter. If you guys know about dark matter, that's crazy. Yeah.
Educate us.
Yes. No, I'll just give you a brief lesson in astrophysics. When you observe the universe, and we use telescopes and so on to see how things are behaving, and how they behave is generally influenced by gravity, the amount of gravity that's out there. When we do that, and we add up all the matter that we can see out there in the universe and guess is there, and then we look at all the gravity that's out there in the universe affecting how things move, there's a big discrepancy, right? There's a huge discrepancy with how much matter there is and how much gravity there is. It's like, if we've got X amount of matter, there shouldn't be so much gravity. And so dark matter is at the moment what we've come up with to explain that and say, look, there's actually this other type of matter out there that does have its own gravity, but that doesn't interact with light, so that you can't see it or observe it.
There's so much
anyway, but that's 70. It's 70% or so. Yeah,
Wow, that's ridiculous. There's so much that we don't know that
it's a massive thing that we don't know.
Yeah, and then when you think about like this infinite timeline, right? Like, all the advancements that are yet to come in human history that we won't be around to see, it's exponential.
Oh, yeah.
The scale for this is, beyond our
So do you
comprehension.
feel grateful to have been born at this time? Do you think that, like I just missed the boat, should have been born a bit earlier, or should have been born a bit later?
I'm right exactly where I need to be.
Good answer.
I'm living out my destiny.
I think baby boomers had it pretty good.
For sure. If you want to analyze like the best period in time to live, or like to be born, I think it probably makes a lot of sense to look at like 1945 to 1950. Like if you're born 1948, you grow up in the 50s, but now you're a teenager in the 60s, you're in your 20s in the 70s, right? You're able to potentially access the property market back then, and now you're set up, right?
Yeah,
Like,
and you grew up in the absence of internet and technology.
You get exactly. You
Yeah.
get to see Jimi Hendrix play live, and now I'm just such a fan of that era.
Yeah.
Like, not just the music, because people know I absolutely love the music of that era, and we want to talk about music on the
Yeah,
show,
definitely.
actually.
Yeah.
But just the culture and the shift that was going on, so much emphasis on love and so much anti like machine, anti-war sort of things going on, which is sort of what I'm all about, to be honest.
Yep.
And like with the recent events happening today, it's so we live in such a terrible time that it's like a blessing to have good people here. You know what I mean? And if I can be a contribution to that good people, then we need more of that. You know what I mean? Like the days are so dark that being, a soldier of the light is so much more compelling.
Yep.
You know what I mean? To know that against all odds in this crazy timeline that we've constructed with it, like to ourselves, like even with current events going on now, like if we're talking about time travel, like the fact that Israel is now created, that's centered in the Middle East, and that's causing huge problems because the Jews don't like the Arabs don't like the Jews. There's huge ties to the United States because the United States continue to back Israel. So therefore, there's never-ending conflict in the Middle East, right? That didn't have to happen, but that's just the way.
Succinct summary.
But there's a lot more going on at play at that, and that's just one region in the world. You've got.
Are you Jewish?
No, I'm not. I look
okay.
Jewish.
Yeah.
Right. So like, despite my appearance,
For those of us only listening at home, Ethan does look extremely Jewish.
I do. I really do.
I put up the funny joke there. The audience can't see it.
Yeah, if you remember the 60s, then you were not in the 60s. Well, psychedelic drugs had a huge renaissance in the 60s.
Oh, I think you're saying recent times.
Oh, well, I guess psychedelics have always been a part of human nature, and talking about ancient history, they're part of a
What
lot
role
of
did
ancient
they have with them? We don't know. Yeah.
a large role. You have
Yeah.
to think, like there's a lot of evidence, like even things like the pineal gland imagery in ancient Egypt.
Oh, yeah.
a lot of that plays into like.
What about the handbags that they have? Do you know about that?
I know
those
about the
handbags
handbags.
are crazy.
The handbags are weird, but
Yeah.
no, we don't know what the handbags are.
And
you
they're
know what I
like
mean?
the handbags are shown in ancient Egyptian iconography and then in like Mayan
It's crazy.
sculptures as well. They had no contact.
And they're so distinct. They're the exact same little handbag. What are they carrying? Are they like what's going on?
Or is that just a coincidence where it's like kind of a fairly likely thing to be drawing and incorporating?
Can we pull up like a little image of the handbag that we're talking about, Carl? If you just type in ancient Egypt handbag man or something like that, or even ancient handbag man drawing, it should come up. But
That's
no,
going to really tie this all together.
But I think like that's where people like Graham Hancock become so much more compelling? Is there,
There's a problem there that they're identifying, which is,
a civilization
you can see that
of
problem
prehistory,
being there. It's
potentially?
very visible. Yeah. Go images.
Yeah, hit images, Carl. So let's see if we can see this. All right.
Yeah, there you
see
go.
that little.
Yeah.
Get that first one up. Make sure the audience can have a look at that, and maybe even this one down here where they have a bunch
So
of those
the idea is
handbags next to each
these
other.
are from cultures vastly separated by distance and time.
And look, that could just be a bucket that they're carrying some water in, but these are found all over the place in
True, buckets
ancient
would have been a big
civilization.
part of their lives.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
But they weren't necessarily depicting everyday lives when they were doing these.
That's not a creature that would be carrying a bucket full of water. It's a very important figure right there.
It's hard to understand
That's
if these
thought.
people were
I think.
motivated. Were they motivated by just mythical thought, by psychedelic, or genuine encounters with the divine or with extraterrestrial life? Like, is that eagle?
Or
Someone saw that. Someone
With
saw
us
that.
as time travelers.
Oh, that would be the most insane.
The aliens were just us.
The
all
most
along.
insane
Yeah.
would be that it's just us.
Yeah,
that
like
these little
Interstellar, right?
yeah, well, that these little grey-bodied people are just us 10,000 years in the future, and that's
Yeah.
how we evolve.
Yeah.
That's how we look eventually. And like it makes a little bit of sense. Like they got these big heads because they're very intellectually focused. They don't use their arms and limbs
Yeah,
or
yeah.
anything like that, so they're super skinny, right? And they just depend entirely on technology, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, the whole alien thing is either there are aliens out there, which is a really scary thought, or there are no aliens out there and we're completely alone in the universe, which is also a scary thought.
Oh, the Fermi paradox.
The Fermi,
Yes,
you know the
correct. Yes,
Fermi
yep.
paradox. Well, that's a scary thing too, because if we haven't seen aliens, that means we never developed the technology to become intergalactic.
Yes,
really,
yeah.
which is quite a scary and like crazy thought experiment in
Yeah, it's
itself.
because we didn't invest enough in Elon Musk.
Well, like
Let him do all the ketamine he
he's on a crazy amount of drugs these days. Did you
That's what
see?
they say.
Like that's what they say. That's what they
He
say.
might just be autistic.
He definitely is.
Yeah.
Like he's not beating those allegations.
Yeah, yeah.
But at the same time, he's a genius, and that's
100%.
it's undisputed. I think criticism of Elon Musk is very fair. I feel like he does a lot of crazy things, and he's in a crazy position
He's in a
of
position.
power.
Yeah, exactly. He's in a
And-
position where he could do so much good.
And it's
But
kind of
he
like
does not.
and it's kind of like unfounded a little bit too, because he wasn't
He
elected.
actually denied the drug use, which I think is an interesting denial, because if you were Elon Musk and you are doing a lot of drugs, a lot of people, like we were talking about, a lot of people would have to know about that. So for him to come out and deny it, it exposes him later on. So him deny it actually led me to think he actually isn't on them.
Yeah.
Because he would know, it's like, yeah, if I come out and deny, it's like this assistant, this VP, all these people have seen me do it. Any one of them could come
Eventually,
forward. So
it's
him
gonna be worse.
deny, it's a situation where you would just be silent. He just wouldn't say anything. Him denying actually has some credibility to me.
I think.
Denying that he's a rampant drug addict.
Yeah. I think, even when you see in interviews and stuff like that, he is a little bit strung out sometimes.
He does. I agree.
But again, that's kind of his nature
was
a little
never
bit too.
normal.
Yeah, he was never exactly. He was never normal, so it's hard to gauge his behavior. But I think
And also that all the pressure he's put under, all the hate he gets, all the work he does, all the different companies he builds, those would destroy any person. I
Agreed.
think.
And
Yeah.
he the fact that he's still going is just insane, because he's been at the head of
several avant-garde companies,
Agreed.
running all of them concurrently.
and he's been doing this for a while
It's
now,
insane.
and he has no signs of slowing down. He's speeding up,
Yeah.
because he was only a private sector guy, but then he was a public sector guy. He was in the government for a little bit, and now he's out. And there's been this Trump fight, and now this
He should have made
makeup.
a bit better. Yeah.
Oh, that was terrible.
From a strategic point of view, or if you're an investor in Tesla or something, you probably do really wish he'd handled that differently.
I think it's really poor management from the Republican Party. I think
Okay.
a lot of this they talk about the first 100 days, first 120 days, whatever we are now.
Yep.
There's been some just terrible mistakes made from the Republican Party, not necessarily on the policy side, but from the communication and the media
That's
side.
everything.
It is everything, because the public turns on you, and now we're seeing huge riots all over the states.
Yeah.
Protesting Trump, talking about him as this not no kings protest, thinking of him
Yeah,
as
I
a
saw
king and
that.
an
Yeah.
authoritarian dictator. And it's very, very, very concerning, where this is leading, because I feel like Trump,
I feel like he has good intentions, but he's just communicating it in the most terrible way possible sometimes. Like he has an inflammatory nature when it comes to the way he communicates.
He's extraordinarily
And
divisive.
even when he's trying to do good things, just the way he communicates it almost
Very
makes,
abrasive.
Exactly. It makes like 70,
He's
80%
always
of
going
people stop listening.
It's very polarizing. Do you think civil wars are still possible? Do you think civil war is possible in America or in Europe?
I hope.
Something I think about a lot.
I don't think
I don't think
about-
we will have a civil war here in Australia.
No, not necessarily.
We don't have that level of
We don't care enough.
polarization. No, we don't care enough.
We don't care enough.
You're exactly right.
If you talk to Americans, they talk about politics all the time.
Yeah, if
and
you
no one in
go to
Australia does.
Europe, right? In Europe, they have a litany of different social problems that people are extremely upset about and that they talk about every day.
Yeah.
And that straight away is an indicator of like they are closer to civil wars than we could be.
No, agreed. As Australians, we don't have the patience for that type of stuff.
It's just not. Yeah,
We're not concerned.
Can't see that, right?
No,
Yeah,
no.
that's good.
And it's great.
Because we're also probably not going to get invaded either.
You'd hope not
get-
as well.
yeah,
we're
affected
we're
by war.
removed. We're
Like,
removed.
you know, those videos coming out of, obviously they started, but coming out of Tel Aviv, right? And you're like, these are people in their apartment buildings. They're just filming outside the window of their apartment building of a missile coming down a couple blocks away, right? And so you're just looking at that like, yeah, that could have been your building. And it's just like the thought of this is a modern city, and any of the cities in that region. It's just, yeah, like it's something that you would is never possible here in Sydney, which is such a blessing.
It feels like that. And that is such a blessing. It really is. Because it's
Well,
the
I
reality.
wonder what our anti-air defense
wouldn't be
anti-air
good.
defenses are like.
It
Right?
wouldn't
If
be-
someone
it wouldn't
did
be-
fire something to us,
It wouldn't be as good as the Iron
Someone
Dome in
fired-
Tel Aviv.
yeah, someone fired like those hypersonic missiles they have that go into orbit,
Yeah.
and then come back down. Someone did that to Sydney, right?
Would
I
we
wonder
be
if
able
we
to-
even have something that could stop that. Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I have no idea. Carl, see if we do. Sydney, like military defense
I
system.
don't know if you should Google.
I don't know. I don't even know what you're going to type in to get this to work, but we'll see.
Yeah, it's fascinating what we actually would have, or do we just rely on the deterrent of being America's ally? Like, how many liberties or corners do we cut with our own defense? What would we actually be like if we were forced to defend ourselves?
Very scary prospect to think about. And I think, it's so strange to see, like even today,
Why would anyone want to do that? But anyway, yeah.
Trump wheels out this giant military parade,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
And he's
Is
meant
that
to
for his
be.
birthday?
No, I don't think so. I don't think so. I thought it was just he's always wanted this military parade. He actually wanted it in his first term and didn't get it, but now he was able to get it now.
Yeah.
It's very strange to see this considering he's the anti-war candidate.
That's true.
He
That's
was
true.
he
Great
was
point.
elected because he's going to end the war in Ukraine in one
He's
day
working on it.
and end the war in Gaza and things like that. And to your point, he is actually working on it. The Democrats, they were just funding it. They weren't working on it at all. It didn't feel like that, at least. They were just happy to let
They lack
Ukraine-
strategic clarity on what to do with that situation. That's
sure.
fair. Is he making a giant contribution towards sorting these things out so far?
No, it has to.
Probably would say no.
The answer's no. And it's
But I'm
terribly
always hesitant
sad.
to make assertions about what someone has or hasn't done after only 100 days in office, because as we spoke earlier about, I'm a big believer in long-term strategies being the ones that are most likely to find success.
And I think that
Is he? Yeah.
oh, sorry, no. You were
No,
saying?
no, that's fine.
Well, he's just gone so crazy in this first 120 days of just doing everything.
Well, he's spoken a lot.
Yeah, well,
He's
it's
tweeted a lot.
always going to be a reality TV show when it comes to Trump. And I think,
Best reality.
it is a crazy reality TV
Unmissable.
show. It
I never
really
miss an
is.
episode.
Like his sit down. Did you see his sit down with the South African Prime Minister
Yeah,
with Ramaphosa?
hilarious.
Oh my good! It's like
It's a
60
skit.
minutes. It's like it's like me setting you up on the podcast
Yeah.
to show you something you've done in the past. Like how
No,
crazy is
you
that?
did a lot more research
Yeah.
than he had done. Yeah, he didn't know anything.
No, he dude, it really is a reality TV show
Some
to
of the
him.
things he said.
It really is. And I
I
think
look at him like Ron Burgundy, who is deplorable but hilarious, and I'm a huge Anchorman fan, right? Love Anchorman.
I see him as someone who has like a heart of passion for the United States. I think if he really just wanted to be a billionaire and chill out, he could.
That's a good point.
But
Yeah.
he's doing this out of his own motivation, and he genuinely believes what he's doing is the best for the country. Is it?
Yeah.
Who knows? Like when it comes to these policies,
Some people
right?
said that about Musk getting involved in politics, right? They're like, well, he's a billionaire who's the richest man in the world. So he might be the type of person that you want in politics because he has nothing really left to gain. And because, there's no money left for him to make, right? And that's one argument that people made. You could make the other argument of like, capitalism doesn't really work like that. Enough is never enough. And, everyone, no matter how much money they have, will always try to look out for their own interests. And so you should distrust him just as much as you would distrust a normal politician.
Exactly. And I think that's
Interesting
why
arguments.
That's why I think the argument kind of like it gets sidelined because it could go either way and you don't necessarily know, and you have to judge based on character, not on wealth, status, money going into the role.
And you
like,
think Trump has good character?
No, I wouldn't say Trump has
Hard to
good.
say he's good- has good character.
Do I think Trump
He
has good
better
character?
than
No.
the alternative. That's
Yes.
always the thing, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So
In my
who's he
opinion-
up against? Yeah.
Well, he's
It's amazing that they're a country of 350 million people with a lot of wealth and the best universities in the world, and those were your two choices. Those were the two best of the best of the best.
I feel like the vote this time though wasn't like, oh, are we voting for Kamala Harris or are we voting for Trump? It was, are we voting for the machine or are we voting for this crazy guy? You know what I mean?
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
sort of what
That's a
it
good
felt
way of
like.
summing it up.
And people were so outraged by how the last 4 years has gone that they chose the crazy guy over the machine. And I think
And that's how he got unelected as well the first time, where there was a similar, like in 2020.
Yeah, exactly. Where he lost and he claimed that
Right.
he won and
Yeah.
all the
Oh,
whole
that was
thing.
crazy.
Like, and then he came on like the Joe Rogan Experience and didn't have an answer for why that he got cheated out of the
remember
election,
that.
which is
Yeah.
very strange. So
Joe actually pressed him.
I think the messaging before they came into office was better than the like reality
he's
of it
great
has
at
been.
elections.
He really is.
Maybe not so good at governing.
And it's just right idea, wrong execution. Like even what we're seeing with these ICE raids and these terrible protests now, like their border policy of the last 4 years was unsustainable, right? They cannot
And
they cannot.
if someone's in your country illegally, should you make efforts to deport them? I think a lot. Yeah. How would we react to that in Australia if that was the case?
I think it's, as all things, it needs to be a matter of due process. We don't live in a totalitarian society. There needs to be like rules and laws in place. And, Trump has now signed executive orders saying that, people who are part of the community and have integrated can stay. And I think a lot of the early action from, the Republican Party should have been focused on criminals and, people who are like in jails and things in the United States who are there illegally, and they should be shipped out first. Not what they're doing. They're like the ICE raids are happening at people's like high school graduations. They're dragging people
I didn't
away,
see that.
putting
No way.
like little kids who are there illegally in like little zip ties and putting them in the car. Like this is it's terrible.
That is
that's why
crazy.
that's why
Who
these
are the people
that's
that
why
are
these
doing it?
protests.
Imagine if that's your job.
That's what they're instructed to do. And
Yeah,
it's-
right.
And that's what it's like. Right idea, terrible execution. You know what I mean? And then his inflammatory language makes it worse. You know what I mean? And I think like that's the same thing that we're seeing with like the Ukraine-Russia situation. I think Trump genuinely wants to end that war in Ukraine, and it's like it's evident. It's evident that he's tried. He's brought Zelensky on. He's yelled at him for 2 hours and said, "Please stop this war." Right? And then they had the meeting.
He's tried to play to Putin and
Exactly.
woo him. Yeah, he has tried.
And he has
He
set
hasn't
up
succeeded.
and they haven't
I
succeeded.
don't think he will succeed.
It's very.
I think he's
it's very
given enough
complicated.
indications to Russia that US support of Ukraine is not there to last. And so Russia will be like, if we just hang in there, Ukraine's about to get abandoned by the US. Europe won't be able to make up for the shortfall created by the US stopping support of Ukraine, and Russia would be able to beat Ukraine if Ukraine doesn't have US support.
And that just
They'll just hang around.
And you've put that so perfectly, and that's why a deal is so important for these two, because it's really
He could
the
ever
only.
put something on the table that would make Putin go, all right, I'll take that deal.
I think you can.
Yeah?
Because listen, okay, when it comes to the regions that you're talking about, like Lugansk and Donbass, which are the two regions that there's currently being like conflicted over, I think Putin is less concerned about the ownership of those regions as he is that Ukraine is part of NATO. I think if the US was to take back Ukraine's NATO
already did that.
status, is that true?
Yeah,
Is Ukraine part of NATO?
Ukraine
Have
was
they
never
withdrawn?
Ukraine was never part of
no,
NATO.
yeah.
There was some discussions about it entering the program to assess its NATO membership. That has been very much shot
shot down by JD Vance, by I think even before the Trump administration was in power. But I get what you're saying. Like there's certain things you can put on the table that would make Putin think. I think it's just about how he could sell it to his people, because they've lost hundreds of thousands of people. They've basically turned into a war economy, and so they've spent billions and billions of dollars. So he needs something he can take back to his people and say, look, I won, I did it. And I don't know if they could put any type of deal on the table where it would look like a win to his people that he could sell to them.
No, I understand what you're saying.
He's a dictator. Dictators, they have some strengths that we've spoken about, but they have weaknesses where they have to constantly worry about being overthrown by a population that vastly outnumbers them. Putin, for a time, was obsessed with watching videos of Gaddafi getting executed, right? So Gaddafi was the dictator of Libya for decades, and obviously he and Putin had a relationship with each other. And Gaddafi ultimately was, the mob came to get him, and they found him in like a tunnel, and they brought him out and they paraded him in front of it, kind of like what happened with Mussolini as well. They paraded him in front of him. They ended up like bayoneting him and hanging him and then shooting him in the head or whatever. And apparently Putin was just obsessed with watching that video because it just had he had this morbid fascination with it, and because he thought, this could be me. And it could be him. Yeah, but you can just see him watching that video, right? And yeah, when you're a dictator, it's like, the mob could come and get you at any point. So that would be something you think about a lot.
And you've seen Putin take care of his rivals before, political rivals before. How many scandals have there been on that?
Incredible in the worst possible way.
He really is. Yeah. He's undefeated.
Yeah, he's undefeated.
And
I think he's been in charge of Russia longer than Stalin was.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Because he's been in power since
the late 90s.
The late 90s, like 98, 99, something like that.
Yeah, fascinating.
And before that, he was ex-KGB. So he's not, he's he's KGB.
Extremely shrewd. And what he's done. Yeah. Remember that general last year and his plane just blew up? What happened with that?
Who knows?
I think the Russian authorities are still investigating the crash.
You know what
I'm talking about, right?
Find out the answer.
Yeah.
Speaking of crash, how about that terrible plane accident?
Yeah. Do they figure out? Oh, no, you wouldn't know.
No,
months, right?
no. Well, they have found the black boxes. Okay. So we will know.
Just make the plane out of the black box material.
Yeah, then it would never go down, right? I actually wanted to have a podcast on Saturday night or Friday night after it happened with two of my mates. One's an aeronautical engineer and one's a pilot.
Very cool.
That would have been a great episode to shoot. One of them's in Sweden right now, and the other has engineering exams at uni, so not ideal.
But that would have been an interesting. Guys.
Yeah,
hard to get a hold of.
I know, but that would have been an interesting episode for sure.
270.
And one lone survivor.
That is insane.
Seat A11.
Oh my gosh.
The lucky seat.
That's now going to be a very expensive seat.
Yeah, exactly. You won't be able to book it. It'll be sold out. Oh man. It is, but it is an absolute.
And just like there's video of it, right? And it's like, it just kind of falls out of the sky. What is going on there?
And it's kind of, the latest thing in a long list of problems for Boeing.
I think don't Jetstar have that exact plane? Like
we have a lot of that plane was that plane left from an Australian airport a week ago.
No, it did.
It did. Find that, Carl. Find that. I don't know exactly.
Wow.
Yeah, it might have been Melbourne airport. I don't know exactly, but that's true. And
you think about that with planes, like they do go around for years and years, and they're all getting older and older, and we haven't had that many new really good ones come in. They were the ones that came in, and they had a lot of faults with them, right?
Well, there's been, there's a lot of scrutiny coming Boeing's way for good reason, because as I was saying, this is like, the latest thing in a long list of their dirty laundry.
Yeah, I'm thinking of there was these planes that they had to decommission.
Yeah.
I can't remember what they were called. Yeah, I've got to brush up on my plane.
If my pilot friends were here, they'd know. Yeah. But
wow, that's amazing.
The fact that this guy got out,
it was probably in a lot of places over the last few days. It's a plane, so
it's going to move around for sure. But it was in Australia.
Amazing.
Just an absolute tragedy.
What a terrifying way to go too. Because they would know.
You'd be so scared and frightened.
Right. There would there'd be a lot of kids on there, but like it's not one where it doesn't happen instantly at all.
Yeah, here we go. You were right, Carl. Melbourne to Delhi on June 8th, which was a week ago. Wow. Yeah. Crazy. And double engine failure. We know that?
Well,
it
looks like it.
We don't know that for sure, but that's what the pilot said as they were going down.
Oh, he
made a call. Yeah, mayday, like no lift,
double engine failure, unable to control the wings, and then 100 meters away from the
Unable
tarmac,
to control the wings?
unable to. So the way I understand it is that they generate lift via the flaps on the
Yeah,
wings.
right.
So he
So
was
his flaps weren't working
his flaps
either?
weren't working.
So how could a double engine failure and the flaps not work?
And the craziest thing about this is that those engines run completely independently.
Okay.
So if one engine, I checked this with my friend, if one engine goes down, the plane can be
Yeah,
absolutely
right.
okay with just the other engine.
Right.
So who knows what's going on?
4-engine planes.
Yeah, and as Carl just said, 4-engine planes exist, and they're able to do the same thing. So it's very strange that it goes down. When it was absolutely fine a week ago, and now both engines fail at exactly the same time, and they're not able to course correct or do anything about it. The black box is going to reveal more, but it is a tragedy.
Wow. Yeah.
Because I guess if that gliding was screwed up, like it would have still crashed, kind of, but maybe a bit softer.
Yeah.
Like, if it was
There's
able
probably
to
not
glide
a lot of good landing spots in
No.
India.
Well, I do want to ask my friends, because the only thing that I can think of is if they were able to control the wings and control like the steering of the plane, would they have enough time to turn around and land back on the tarmac that they took off from? That would be their only point of escape, because they're
They
taking
have no
off-
engines.
Well,
Yeah.
well, but the thing is, they can glide. Even if you have engine failure, you can glide, right? But my pilot friends are far more well versed to talk about this. I
Let's
don't know. if they-
speculate wildly about it.
That's what the whole point of the show
yeah.
is, to do that, and we've done that tonight.
Name for the show.
Oh,
Wild
it really has
speculation.
been. No, this has been great. JP,
Yeah.
this has been absolutely awesome. It's been
It
a
has
pleasure to
been.
have you
What
on
an
the show.
experience.
Thank you so much. You're the best.
You're the best, man.
you are.
All right.
Thanks, guys. Catch you next time.
Okay. See you, everyone.